Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to DNN, where we just give the news as we see it, without sugarcoating, without cheerleading. We just tell it how it is because math matters and because somebody has to. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my buddy Travis. Travis, how we doing this weekend, brother?
Jack, it's been better. Just to the viewers, just to let you guys know real quick, I have found an enormous amount of mold in my house. So I'm living in a toxic mold house right now. Sadly, I'm forced to move, so I have to either find something to buy right now or find something to rent right now. And the worst possible time to do that in June. That's literally the worst time to buy and rent. So I have to do that. My wife currently has 102-degree temperature and all my children are sick. So I feel like a complete failure as a father and husband. That's how it's going this week. How are you doing, Melody?
We're doing great. We're doing great. There's no way I can follow that, Travis. Sorry.
I mean, I'm doing really good, Jack. I'm sorry. But this is DNN, right? It's about the truth, even if you don't want to hear it. So, I mean, I've been better, brother.
I wish you and the family all the best before you go there. Please, I hope everybody gets better, and good luck with everything you're dealing with, sir.
I appreciate it. So just for the viewers, you guys, we have about 7 stories to cover today. I just want to give you guys a heads up. The first one is actually an interview from one of our viewers, none other than the legendary Johnny Fly. I see you, Johnny, right down there. Johnny's already here. So he's going to do an interview of all 3 of us. Second story is going to be from Jack. He's going to do a weekly wrap-up of Doom. I think, is that what we're calling the weekly wrap-up of Doom? So we're going to do the weekly wrap-up of Doom. Story 2, story 3 is Melody. She's going to talk about... Yes, yeah. Okay, all right. But Melody is going to talk about the elections that are going around the world, kind of what's going on. That's going to be story 3. Story 4, I'm going to do a report on the housing market, and I'm going to compare it and basically get Jack and Melody's opinion on whether or not the housing market right now is worse than 2022. And I think it's important to look at 2022 because, again, according to value indexes, pretty much across the board, we had deflation happen at a faster pace than the GFC. In 2022, people are like, nothing happened because we ended in the positive. But people forget it was, 2 different things happened that year. We started the beginning of the year, surging prices, end of the year, rock bottom. So we're going to look at that. Story number 5 is going to be, you guys bear with me right here. This is from Jack. This is the Fed acknowledging their ambiguous job numbers. Is that right, Jack? Is it ambiguous? You want to doom me with a slow reading group? That's fine, whatever. Story number 6, Melody on consumer sentiment. So Melody's gonna do story 6, consumer sentiment. Story number 7 is Jack. He's gonna do an update on a few events that are pretty solid. And real quick, just good morning to everyone. RR, there's Christy, there's Brian, there's Jay. There's everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We cannot do this without you guys. We have some announcements to make, but I'm just going to tell you right now, it was really hard to start this one, and we did it for you. Every one of us here loves you. We want to give you the truth. We want to give you transparency. We don't want to lead anyone astray. We don't want you to spend your money. We want you to be cautious. So thank you for joining us. You guys want to give any shout outs before we start with Johnny? No shout out?
Just a shout out to both of you and to you, Travis, for coming on after quite a week. And, but I think it's important that our viewers understand we're just regular people. We are going through the same stressors they are. And here's a perfect example of how, on one side of it, the landlord has got a big issue while you also have a big issue on their hands. So, but thank you for, braving all of this and leading us here today.
Well, yeah, of course. I didn't want you to beat me up.
I know.
Okay. Jack,
yeah.
Anything?
I just want to say welcome to Johnny Fly. We were talking earlier before we started. He self-described himself as a troll. I've seen him on my channel quite a lot and on your channel. I wish I had 1,000 trolls like Johnny Fly. So let's bring him in here. I'm looking forward to this.
All right, guys. We're going to start our first story. Here is our man, Johnny Fly. He says he's a troll. Let me just build you up real quick, Johnny. First of all, you guys, Johnny's brilliant. Okay, he's playful, he's lighthearted. There's so much doom, But if you guys like what Johnny has to say, he's going to interview us again. Viewer, we want to bring viewers. We want to give you guys a voice. There's only one Johnny, but don't forget, you guys, go to his. Where is it? Right here. Okay. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, you guys. I just wanted to look at my face. Sorry to the viewers on that one. Boom, right here. So if you guys want more information on Johnny, here's Johnny iFly. He plays video games a lot. He promised he wouldn't embarrass me and he'd have a video up on real estate. But he embarrassed me. He doesn't. He only has video games. But if you guys want to watch a grown man play video games for some weird reason, here you go. But don't worry, you guys. He actually has something that's super cool. Finally, Look at what Johnny did. So if you guys want more information, go to Logan Trading Company. Johnny right now is I don't want to, put words in your mouth, but he's about to quit the state of California and go full-time into YouTube and making hats. Is that right, Johnny?
This is absolutely correct. I do apologize for not having any videos up, Travis. I have been with the flu for the last 3 to 4 days. So I have 7 scripts ready to go. I'm going to record 3 videos either tonight or tomorrow and get them posted. The first 3 videos I'm looking at doing is how the California budget deficit happened, how it affects not only Californians, but the rest of the country. I'm going to be doing another video on immigration as a neutral kind of behind the scenes look at what's going on. And then finally, I will wrap up with a housing market video, all based off of my perceptions. Part of my background too is I've built a few homes in the past up on the Oregon coast in a town called Bandon, Oregon. So the way I look at stuff is building costs, price per square foot, sold price per square foot. Those are the ways that I kind of look at things. And then also just going around my neighborhood and looking at new home communities around me. Obviously, you stayed at my house when you did your Sacramento video. You understand the area that I live in. And oddly enough, I've noticed a lot of shadow inventory. And I kind of want to point out some of the things that people should look at when they go to new home communities to see that shadow inventory. You see a house that says occupants, there, and there's no shades up on the windows, no floor mat, no pots, plants outside. Those are all things that I look at where I'm like, I don't know if the house is really sold. So those are going to be the first 3 videos that I put out there. And then of course the hat business I'm taking full time and also streaming on TikTok, selling hats. And I have the marketplace up there as well.
And Johnny, you forgot to mention to the viewer something extremely important. You mentioned that I stayed at your house when I was doing my tours, but what you didn't mention is how Logan, your dog, loves me more. Why didn't you mention that?
Still is very fearful when I pull a jar of peanut butter out of the fridge, Travis.
Okay.
That never went away.
Let's get
We
to the
went
questions.
there. Yes, we did. Now I understand the t-shirt, Johnny.
Yes.
Hold up that shirt. I'm digging the attire we got.
Hold on.
Violates community standards.
That is me to T.
Community standards at this stage of the game, you're not living. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, you guys wanted some smoke. Here it is.
All right. Should we jump into the questions then?
The mic is yours, brother.
Okay. We'll go in order. The first set of questions are going to be for Melody. This one comes from Travis's favorite person in the world, Trey. He notes that you recently said there were a lot of people moving out of Tennessee. Is this still the case? Do you think will be negative price pressure on homes because of this, or are we already seeing signs of that?
So I don't believe I said moving out of Tennessee is negative demographics, but Nashville City, Nashville County has negative demographics. I believe that Tennessee is probably going to be a top destination over the next several years as people are able to move. But what happened last year is we had fewer people move on that they've ever seen on record in terms of migration. And I think that's because people, we pulled forward a lot of that household formation during COVID. So, when I look across the country in terms of the states that I think that are going to do better than others, I do believe Tennessee will likely do better, but they are going to experience pain because of all of the speculation here. You can look at Nashville, Knoxville, Sevierville, even this little town, Johnson City, where I live as well. Just so much speculation occurred. So it's going to take some time for that to really get out of the system. So here, I kind of believe we'll probably see a small price decline at the end of the year, very end of the year. So it might not even be reported till that into the beginning of the year. But in 2025 is when I honestly believe we're going to see the biggest price corrections, and that'll happen in Tennessee as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Sure.
We have another question from Verum Rex. So he says, or she, I don't know, but I assume he, student loan delinquency and non-payment will begin to show up on people's credit this year. How much will that affect people's purchasing power or ability to qualify for new home or auto loans? And for existing homeowners who just decided not to pay in the last few years, spend to the end, how much will it put pressure on their ability to continue paying their mortgage or other living expenses?
Yeah, so I think for sure this is going to have an impact in purchasing power when we come around to actually, those delinquent student loans being reported. I think, there's been a lot of people living off buy now, pay later. And probably once those credit scores do take a hit, and it's going to be very interesting to watch, like in real time, credit scores that one month and then credit scores the next. I think that's going to be a real, actually interesting learning experience. So I definitely think purchasing power is going to be impacted. I kind of think it may be being impacted right now, especially as people are turning to things that they probably no longer qualify for, like buy now, pay later. And we've also seen credit card spending coming down as a combination of people pulling back, but also because they're just reaching their limits. So I definitely think this is going to have an impact. It's probably not going to be as outsized as everybody thinks, because I think already people are slowing down, either because they aren't allowed to spend anymore because of credit card limits, or because they realize what's coming around the corner. And then the second part of the question was just mortgage delinquency for the people that haven't been paying. I'm already seeing in client books what's happening is delinquency is getting very sticky, which means what you would have is people would pay and then they wouldn't pay, then they'd pay again. But you're starting to see that stickiness, and they're rolling from 30 days to 60 days to 90 days. So I believe, but by June of next year, we're going to have material delinquency, as people just cannot afford property taxes, insurance, student loans, and probably this credit card debt.
Awesome. Thank you. So, next question is actually from me. In a recent interview on Thoughtful Money, you talked about lending in the private note space and sovereign wealth funds buying out delinquent mortgages. Can you explain why this is important? Can you do a brief overview of what you talked about? And are there any updates since you talked about that a month ago?
Yeah. So why it's important is we've all been looking at charts that sort of show, inventory being down, significantly, even since 2008. We've also, and we've thought about that story as there's just not enough inventory. But when you go out on the road, you absolutely can see that there's plenty of inventory. So it really made me start to think about what else could actually be happening. And I think in reality, NAR has lost relevance. They've been doing that since 2015, really, even before then. And so that inventory story might be about, the fact that MLSs just aren't the place that we transact anymore. Now you take that over to mortgage lending, and we are looking at, by count, worse production numbers in mortgage than 2008 by count, if you look at the actual count. And we've had 2 terrible years. And so what if instead, it's not just that there's less mortgage activity, but there's a private space that nobody's really capturing, and that's these private notes. And so I think what's happened is, as you've had these communities of Airbnb bros, long-term rental, all of them getting into this space, buying up properties, using this money from sovereign wealth funds to go out and buy properties, none of this is actually being tracked anywhere. And so it's very hard to understand how big this space is. And just a quick primer on it. Essentially, it's going to be someone doing a private note that's not being done by somebody like Rocket or a bank. And so that could be between you and me, Johnny. I could be selling my house and saying, hey, don't you want to buy my house? And you say, yeah, but my hat business, the bank's not going to give me a loan yet. I need 3 years of income or something like that. And then I say, hey, I know you're good for it. Let's do a private contract together. Let's get an attorney and a title company and do it privately. And you can do those transactions. If you have a registered loan officer, you can do as many as you want. And so what I found, I just recently went to a conference in Nashville, and this space is much bigger than I would have anticipated coming from the institutional side. And I think that, so there are about 200 participants at this conference. They would talk to me about $100 million funds. I think this is way bigger. We know that seller financing was around $28 billion. So it's a big space nobody really knows about. And honestly, Johnny, that's all I can say is I don't know how big it is, but I think it's important when everyone's out there saying we have low delinquency. They don't understand that there's all these people out there going up and finding delinquency and buying up those notes from individuals, and there are not a ton of people tracking it. Sorry, that was long.
No, that's awesome. Thank you for providing that insight. I listened to it, and maybe it's my lack of knowledge. It was just hard for me to absorb the information. So I really appreciate you talking about that. Awesome. Thank you.
Hopefully that answered it. Okay.
No, it adds a lot of clarity. Thank you. All right.
Okay, cool.
So next up, who would like to go next? Jack or Travis?
I'll go next. I'm next in vertical order here. Thanks, Melody.
Perfect. So, first question: when does the round tripping smoke and mirrors game from NVIDIA finally become a reality for investors, or does market breadth correct and all the other stocks start catching up to NVIDIA?
So no, first of all, I don't think the other stocks are going to catch up to NVIDIA. The other stocks are heading the wrong direction. Most stocks are treading water, if not heading lower. There's really only a select few that are doing very well. And this isn't a topic we've covered on this channel yet, but for those who don't know, round tripping is basically a practice. It's not necessarily illegal, but it is a deceptive accounting practice where a company makes a strategic investment in one of its own customers, gives them money, and then its customers hand that money right back to them to order their products. So it's their own cash making a round trip, and it looks like organic revenue growth. And this is being done all over the market across the board with NVIDIA. Microsoft is doing it. Amazon is doing it. CoreWeave is doing it. Private equity is doing it. They're creating this almost like a flywheel of money moving around in circles, all to convince retail traders to keep piling into stocks. And it's created one of the biggest stock market bubbles in all time. Now, I think it comes to a head. It finally stops. The trigger will most likely be some quarterly report, maybe the next one, maybe 3 or 4 quarters from now. But at some point, NVIDIA is going to report their earnings. They're going to report another fantastic number like they always do. But then they're going to get to the forward guidance section of their conference call where they say what they expect to earn next quarter, and they're going to disappoint the market. And what that's going to do is cause the market to reset its expectations for NVIDIA's future earnings. And keep in mind, NVIDIA's stock is trading based on what they expect the company to be earning several years from now, based on its current rate of growth. And its current rate of growth is astronomical, and it's just not sustainable. So it's only a matter of time before NVIDIA guides light. I don't know if it's going to be the next quarter, 2 quarters from now, 2 years from now, but it is a mathematical certainty. They're growing so fast right now that at this rate, within a few more years, all of these chips that they're selling would require more power than the entire power grid is capable of even supplying. So the law of large numbers is catching up to them. More and more media outlets and talking heads and analysts are starting to use the phrase round tripping and admit that it's going on. So it's kind of like everybody is right now acknowledging that this is happening, but they're all making money as the stock goes up. So they're looking the other way. Sooner or later, that rug pull is going to happen. I don't have a crystal ball, man. I'd be a lot richer than I am right now if I could tell you when it's going to happen. If you would have asked me a year ago, I would have told you before now. So, it's not a matter of if, though. It's a matter of when, in my opinion.
Awesome. Thank you. Next question. To close out the week, we saw a rising dollar, bonds falling, the gold and silver rebounding. So as you would call it, the shiny correction in crypto. Are we starting to see that flight to safety, or was that just I don't know, just a weird thing that happened towards the end of the week?
It was unusual to see yields falling, especially on the long end of the yield curve, and the dollar rallying. You usually don't see those two things happening in tandem, right? They tend to move in the same direction together. So that's a little bit of a flight to safety attribute, if you ask me. We're also seeing things like gold and silver are doing pretty well. Now, they've come down off of their highs. Silver hit a high of like $32.50 a few days ago. It's down right around $29, $30 now. So it's come back down a little bit, but you also have a little bit of that flight to safety in metals going on as it's right now recovering some momentum from a prior run. And then you've certainly got a flight to safety going on overseas. A lot of Asian markets are buying up gold and silver. So I'm leaning towards there is a flight to safety happening. However, you are seeing things like high value tech stocks are still making seemingly daily all-time highs. So you've also got a stock market that is largely risk on. So we've got qualities of both here. And it's hard to say one or the other isn't going on. Now, there's one other story I would mention that a lot of people aren't noticing, and that's utility stocks are doing very well. Utilities have started to outperform some of the other sectors in the S&P 500. Now, the story goes, these utility stocks are rallying because everybody is saying all these data centers that are being built with the NVIDIA chips, there's going to be so much power demand that the utilities are going to be making more money because electricity prices are going to go up sky high from all this energy demand, which, first of all, that makes those data centers less profitable if that happens, something that reflects on your earlier question. Second of all, that's going to make inflation worse, and that's not good for tech stock valuations. But the other thing, that's the narrative that utilities are doing well, anticipating extra demand from these chips. But utility stocks outperforming the other sectors has also been a flight to safety attribute we've seen in prior markets. When you see people start to go to utility stocks, utilities are viewed as a bond market alternative. So when you see utility stocks doing well, at the same time gold is doing well, at the same time interest rates are heading lower, so bonds are doing well, those are all attributes of people looking for safe havens. So the short answer is a little bit of both right now. You do see a little bit of both. There's some risk-on behavior with the tech stocks, but there's also a lot of that flight to safety happening. And some of the narrative that's being offered up in the financial press doesn't really pass the sniff test.
Yeah, and don't quote me on this. I think the VIX went up by 6% on Friday. So, another thing to look out for. Again, don't quote me on that. That was something that I overheard on a video, but yeah, I'm in agreement with you. There's some weird things going on right now. Speaking of weird, next question. And again, if you're going to cover this later on, we can gloss over this question. But do you think there will be any repercussions for OpenAI appointing the former director of the NSA to the board of directors? Meaning AI stocks might take a hit. OpenAI, Nvidia, Apple, etc., especially with the Apple announcement.
I'll be honest, Sam Altman kind of does whatever Sam Altman wants, and he's not really big on repercussions. He doesn't seem to care. His board tried to fire him, and the board ended up getting fired, and he's making billions. So as far as repercussions for Sam Altman, the market has kind of anointed him as like this new Thomas Edison, which I definitely do not share that view. So I don't think he's at risk of this NSA jumping on the board. Well, not the NSA, a retired NSA director on the board of OpenAI. And we will talk about this in a weekly wrap up. I think Apple is exposed, though, because Apple has historically prided themselves on people's privacy, on holding the line against government surveillance and government intrusion. And Apple just cut that big deal with OpenAI to incorporate ChatGPT into their next generation of high-end smartphones. So Apple is doing one thing and saying something else right now when it comes to privacy and personal data security. So I think Apple probably has more exposure here versus an OpenAI because Apple has made a big deal out of being a privacy-centered company, and that's going to be hard to justify when they're cutting deals with a company that has an NSA director on the board and, essentially backdooring their own product by preloading ChatGPT.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for answering those questions. We're going to move on to Travis. Travis, the first question comes from 50 Blades in Discord. So, what do you see the possibility of a K-shaped housing crash? 50 Blades notes, I had this gut feeling that the crash coming will be among homes that never had that kind of value in the first place. The kind where people waived inspections and now have all sorts of problems hitting left and right. Junk that would have never sold in 2019. I suspect the good homes and good locations probably will remain desirable in a downturn or not, but maybe that's all in my head.
Johnny, I definitely appreciate the question, and to 50 Blades of Gray as well for asking that question. it's really hard to, and for the viewers that don't know what he asked, he's basically saying K-shaped, that different markets are going to react differently. While some markets may crash, others may excel, is basically what he's asking. And here's the thing. We're in an everything bubble. All right. If you go back to the 1990s and you look at, how did the housing market crash? Well, it didn't really crash, right? But the housing market actually crashed in the 1990s in certain metro areas. Okay. But in the 1990s, we didn't necessarily have this massive everything bubble at the same time where income wasn't growing. And that's been my whole, pretty much this entire time, on top of the price increases. It's the fact that the United States income growth is just not there. And so I do believe, Johnny, that some markets are going to react differently. I know that actually for sure. I know that for sure, because Austin is already crashing from my definition of a crash, which is 15%. The thing is that, some people are starting to now talk about Austin, but they weren't previously, because 15%, that doesn't feel like a crash. 20%, that doesn't feel like a crash, because the home values went up so quickly, so much, while income went down. Real income went down. And so although I do think that there's going to be kind of, I guess, a K-shaped recovery in the housing market, that's not saying that every housing market won't correct. I believe that there's going to be correction, and I'm going to say maybe 99.999% of housing markets. I think that, Johnny, and again, I think that because it's an everything bubble. It's not no place other than maybe Jackson, Mississippi. Maybe Jackson, Mississippi. No place dodged a bullet here. I mean, everyone is feeling the pain, and it may not be from the upper end of people that are migrating, but the locals surely do. And when the locals are priced out, when 90%, 80, 90% of the locals are priced out in a housing market, that is not something that can scientifically sustain. In fact, the only way it can sustain, and we've seen this, is by government intervention. And I'm not talking about the high interest rates. I'm talking about the low interest rates. The low interest rates messed everything up. But on top of the low interest rates, the stimulus messed everything up. So they released the floodgates of demand. It's going to take some time for this whole thing to reset. Number one, because the housing market's slow. But number two, and this is what I've been really researching, I'm asking questions why, like what's happening? I mean, brother, there's still so much money in the system that inflation is still in the system. It's killing us. And the reason why it's killing us is it's not our money. We're just paying for it.
Thank you. So this next question kind of ties into what you talked about. This is not my question. Okay. I did not have any input on it. This came 100% from Trey. So, all right. Again, not me whatsoever, but in 2023, Travis, you predicted that we would have over 1 million active listings and negative sold prices, and you lost a bet to a housing expert that you never paid. With your crystal ball being cloudy at best, what is your predictions for the rest of 2024?
My prediction is you're not going to be coming back onto the show, but I could be wrong about that. I'm just one person. It's just a prediction. Predictions don't always go as well. But I'm going to tell you, man, here's the thing that was important to me as a content creator and influencer. First of all, I hate making predictions, but if I do and I don't get them right, here's the really important thing. I ask why. Why didn't this happen? And if you keep asking why, you will keep learning. You will keep enhancing your opinions, your narrative, but you have to ask, even if you're right? If you're not right for the reasons that you thought you're right, you still have to keep asking yourself why. And so when I asked myself why for 2023, I think there was a combination of things, but the primary thing, Johnny, they stopped the bank runs. We were in a period of time starting 2023. I may add, it didn't happen until after February of 2023. We had deflation in the housing market from approximately, on a nationwide average, from June into February, June of 2022 to February of 2023. It's interesting that it stopped. The deflation stopped as soon as they stopped the bank runs and bank term funding program. Now, so I think that had a lot to do with it. But still, in addition, it's not just that, because I keep having to ask myself, why? So in addition to the bank term funding program, which I promised Danielle I wouldn't call it a bank bailout, but it was a little bit like a mini bank bailout. And it definitely bailed out the bulls. It bailed out their narrative, because they didn't have a narrative until that bank term funding program came. And then the Fed put came back into talking. Everyone's talking about the Fed put meaning the government's just going to bail out the lenders. And so I really think, Johnny, where I was really taken by surprise is how quickly they bailed out. Well, sorry, I promise I wasn't going to say that, but how quickly they came to the rescue of some of those banks. Back in the GFC, in my adult career, it took them, I think, what was it, like 2 years to bail out the banks? And now they did it on the weekend behind our backs and then lied to us in front of our face. And I didn't see that coming, brother. But I believe, that's a big reason why I was off in 2023. 2023, there was a rebound. But also, Johnny, I would also caution people on those numbers, because I hope it's clear now how inaccurate the data is, how much manipulation is in the data, in the median prices. Because I could tell you in my housing market, 2023 houses did go down. So that's not true in my housing market. But the problem, Johnny, is I only know that because I have access to raw data. And because I have access to that raw data, I can now do something called, and this is so important, guys, subdivision analysis. But without the subdivision analysis, Johnny, I'm at the mercy of Redfin and Zillow and Fred and Realtor.com, and I think it's a bunch of trash. But nevertheless, there were people buying in 2023. It was one of the lowest since 1990s. So you can call it resilient if you want, but it was still so toxic that there still wasn't a lot of people. I underestimated the government's intervention. I'm just going to say it like that.
Can I add to Travis's answer a little bit there? Because you struck a nerve a little bit with me when you mentioned Danielle and the bailout versus not the bailout. I remember a lot of that drama happening on Twitter. And Danielle did make a point about, because it was expensive money, had like a 5% interest rate, the BTFP. It wasn't technically a bailout. But there was another bailout that happened with that same banking crisis. And that was when the FDIC guaranteed uninsured deposits at every bank that has failed since Silicon Valley Bank went under.
Yep.
All right. The law said, the changes we made to the law after the GFC with Dodd-Frank said 250,000 and over, you get equity in the bank, not your money back. All right. Now there's some exemptions to that, but basically anything over 250,000 should have been lost. That would have been a massively deflationary event if we had let it go that way. And home prices almost certainly would have come down as a result of that. But we decided to guarantee the uninsured deposits. That absolutely was a bank bailout. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, Travis, if we were to take that bet again this year, I would not take it. You look at active listings are up. Now, again, I'm going off of Redfin's data, so that's the one that I kind of follow, but up 16%, median sales price only up 4%. We're slowing down right now. I think we might get to your magical million active listings, and we might actually see some negative price decline by the end of the year. So, again, I wouldn't take that bet again this year, though.
Oh, and to answer what happened to your dollar is you lost it and you blamed me.
Never mind.
Yeah, never mind.
Moving on to the next question, chat. Where was I? Okay, so Travis, this one's mainly for me because I'm constantly in the housing market. Constantly looking for land to buy to build another house, or just looking for that great deal where I could put in some elbow grease and find a nice home. So for people shopping for homes right now, what do you think they should be concerned about most over anything? What should they be honed in on?
The future, brother. It's the future. So when someone goes to buy a home, the way they get their financing is the underwriters take a snapshot of their finances, right? Quick snapshot of the finances. They freeze that in time and say, this is what we have to verify, and you can get the home. But my concern, Johnny, is people don't even know what a recession is. My concern is a lot of young adults, a lot of millennials, they don't even know what an overvalued house is because their entire adult life, home values have just been going up. And so my biggest concern for people that are buying right now is they don't understand what they're really doing. And my biggest concern is most people that are purchasing, in addition to that, is most people are purchasing right now because they feel they have to. Not because if it's a good deal, not because of any of that, because like Melody always says, because society constantly sells them on a lifestyle that will imprison them in debt, and they are good at it. And they want to hear it. People don't want to think that they're going to lose their house, man. And so when the media and the government, everyone is saying, go buy a house. It's cool. Maybe it'll go down a little bit, but you could just refinance later. They're brainwashed. And so I want to add that if, it's a big if, people are purchasing right now, because I made an offer yesterday. I live in a mold house. If you're purchasing right now, I would strongly encourage you to purchase like an investor. I don't care if it's your primary residence. You got to purchase like an investor. What do I mean by that? Please, guys, through subdivision analysis, through simple math, Johnny sponsored the form. This is for free. Find something with wedge. Wedge means equity. Say the house that I put an offer in, I got them down to have 21% in equity. It wasn't enough. But being that I had 21% of equity, that means that if my house went down in value 21%, I'm still okay, because my home that I'm buying has 21% equity. So that's what wedge is. And I can find a wedge, you guys, in Texas. Texas is different than other states. I can find wedge in Texas all day. The hard part is this, and this is the other thing that I want to see people doing: cash flow. It is so hard to cash flow right now. It's crazy. I could find wedge 60, 50, 60, 70, 80, even $100,000. Johnny, you see me posted up in our Discord all the time. I'm like, you guys, look at what I found. But when we move on to that cash flow, it gets stuck. One of the big reasons in Texas is property taxes. Property taxes are through the roof. And so again, wedge, cash flow, and understand what your adjustable expenses of home ownership are. Your payment is not fixed. Even if you have a fixed rate on a mortgage, your payment's not fixed. People right now, Johnny, are getting blindsided by massive skyrocketing increases. And I'm not just using, hyperbole, like straight up 200% increases, 300%. If they went new, 500-600% increases in property taxes. I got a homeowner's insurance quote. You saw in Discord, the homeowner's insurance quote for the home I put an offer in was $5,800 a year. $5,800 a year, you guys. So make sure you understand how your mortgage actually works. Okay, your adjustable stuff, and then also amortization schedule. I'll just end there. Amortization schedule is so important, you guys. They imprison you with interest. Don't let people think, oh, if you buy, it's better than renting. It's better than renting if you make it better than renting. You have to be active, proactive. Pay your amortization schedule down, because the way that loan works is it is so heavily front-loaded with interest. You will never pay off your debt unless you pay that principal down in advance. And just to put this in perspective, if you get a $324,000 house, the interest rate 7%. If you guys paid $3,300 towards your principal in the first year, you would save $22,000 in interest. That's how bad it is.
Awesome. Thank you for that. With that, I know we ran a little bit over on my time segment, so I think we'll end it there. I want to say sincerely, thank you for having me on. Melody, Jack, your content's amazing. Travis, you're amazing too. I know I give you a hard time, but that's out of love. Keep up the great work, and I super appreciate it.
Thank you, Johnny. We couldn't do it without followers like you, and this was so fun. Thanks for your time and coming on. And I hope to see you here again. We'll make that happen. We don't care what Travis says.
Thank you.
Just kidding.
Love you, buddy. We'll see you later, man.
You had me at the t-shirt, Johnny.
Right.
Have a good day.
See you, man. All right, you guys, that's a wrap. So let's move on to story 2. Let me put you in position. Jack is in position. Do you feel like you're in position now, Jack, with that move
Which
right
position
there?
would that be? It's a family show.
You're in the hot seat, okay? You're in the hot seat. Go ahead and take it away, Jack. I got your screen up, brother.
All right, guys. Now for This Week in Doom, we decided we're going to do a quick weekly wrap-up of all the biggest stories that happened in and around finance for the week. Starting with Sunday night last week, we had the European Union elections over across the pond, and right-leaning populist parties swept the European Union elections, most notably in France, where Marine Le Pen's right-wing party took almost twice as many seats in the European Union as President Emmanuel Macron's left-leaning party. And it was such a trouncing that Macron made the risky move of dissolving the National Assembly and calling snap elections for June 30th and July 7th. This is a risky gamble by Macron, attempting to recapture some momentum away from Le Pen's party. And well, it could end up blowing up in his face. And French stocks did not like that move by Macron. The CAC 40 was down almost 6% on the week, as French stocks lack the certainty of what their political situation may look like this time next month. Also going on this week, we got new updates in the GameStop saga, the mother of all meme stocks. Shown here is Roaring Kitty, aka Deep Effing Value, otherwise known as Keith Gill. And last week, he was capturing a lot of attention because of his massive position, 5 million shares of GameStop stock, along with 120,000 call options that expired on Friday. And it was what would Gill do with those call options that had GameStop shareholders really wondering where the stock was going to go. And Gill posted an update of his position showing that he now owns 9 million shares of GameStop and none of those call options. So Gill took some pretty big profits on his 120,000 call options, rolled some of those profits into an additional 4 million shares of GameStop. And well, GameStop stock was up only slightly on the week, and thus ends another chapter in the ongoing feud between the apes and Wall Street surrounding GameStop stock. Also going on this week, there was more attacks in the Red Sea, with the Houthis launching several successful attacks against civilian shipping. The first was against the merchant vessel Verbana, which is a Ukrainian-owned ship. It was hit by 2 anti-ship cruise missiles, with 1 crew member severely wounded who was airlifted off the boat. The Verbana was able to recover control of the ship, and they have moved on from the area. The second was a surface drone attack on the merchant vessel, the Tudor, which is a Greek-owned cargo ship. That was a more successful attack. There is 1 member of the crew remains missing as of this day. The ship was taking on water, and the crew was forced to abandon ship. The ship is still adrift in the Red Sea, as the situation, that other war that we're kind of involved in, kind of not involved in, continues, and it's not getting very much attention in the press. Also going on this week, we got inflation data, and the market just loved the data. The first was on Wednesday. We got the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, which is the most closely watched inflation measure. CPI came in at 3.3% year over year. That's down from 3.4% last month. Inflation was also 0.0% month over month, and that's down from an increase of 0.3% last month. So that was very encouraging inflation data from the headlines. Also, core inflation, which strips out volatile food and energy, came in at 3.4%, also down from 3.6% last month. And the month-over-month number was 0.2%, down from 0.3%. So consumer price inflation is trending downward in the right direction. That means prices are still going up, but they're going up slower than they were last month. The stock market rallied big on that news Wednesday morning and stayed there for most of the week. Then on Thursday, we got more inflation data. We got the Producer Price Index, or the PPI, which measures inflation further upstream in the supply chain. And much like CPI, that was down, with headline PPI at 2.2% year over year. That's down from 2.3% last month. And the month-over-month number was down big at negative 0.2%. So producer prices actually went down for the month. That's versus an increase of 0.5% the month before. So both of those stories adds up to further progress on inflation, which the stock market liked because it means the Federal Reserve may cut interest rates sooner rather than later. We also got more news on Wednesday with Apple making their big artificial intelligence unveil. They unveiled Apple Intelligence. And well, it's basically a calculator and an upgraded Siri that allows Siri to move in and out of different apps, allowing it to see information from text messages and emails and compile that to answer more complex questions. The market initially yawned at this news, with Apple stock was down about 0.5% on that release. And then all of a sudden, a day later, something changed and the market started to rally on this news. Apple has reclaimed the position as the second most valuable company in the world from NVIDIA, rallying several $100 billion worth of market cap after the initial sell-off on this release. And I would add the details were released on Thursday, showing that neither Apple nor OpenAI are going to make any money from this. OpenAI is allowing Apple to put ChatGPT on their iPhones for free. Apple is not paying ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is not paying Apple. It's believed that this being available on Apple's high-end phones may cause more consumers to upgrade to the more expensive phones. And ChatGPT believes that Apple users using their product may cause more of them to upgrade to their paid feature. But right now, no money changing hands, despite hundreds of billions of dollars worth of additional value created in Apple stock. Also going on Wednesday, we got Jerome Powell's press conference at the FOMC, or the Federal Open Market Committee. And as expected, the Fed left interest rates unchanged, surprising nobody. There was a little bit of surprise in the summary of economic projections, which is more commonly known as the dot plot, which showed the average Fed governor believes only one interest rate cut will happen this year. That is down from 2 rate cuts that were predicted back in March. So the Fed, despite some encouraging progress on inflation, the Fed is less likely to cut according to their own projections this year, with 1 rate cut versus 2. Powell would go on to acknowledge some softening or weakening in the labor market and the ongoing progress in inflation as shown by CPI and PPI, but said further data is required before the Fed can act. And lastly, yesterday we got this news that, well, depending on your position, may or may not creep you out. OpenAI announced that former U.S. Army general and retired NSA director Paul Nakasone will join its board of directors and will take on a leadership role amid Sam Altman, shown here, on OpenAI's new safety team. This comes just a few weeks after the entirety of the super alignment team quit OpenAI, citing safety concerns and a chilled working environment at OpenAI. All the safety people quit, and they're being replaced by a former NSA director. And that, folks, is This Week in Doom.
Nothing happened.
Good stuff. Yeah, nothing to hear here. That's pretty. So we got about, I don't know, we got about like 14 minutes before we're at, or about that before we're at it. We'll take some questions, to the viewers. You guys throw up some questions. Everyone. Okay, we already got the Skynet. If you guys don't Skynet, it's Terminator. But Melody, do you have something you want to talk to Jack and ask Jack first?
Well, no. So we'll be talking about the first story a little bit more as we do the tour of elections. So I think, I don't know about everybody else, but I was completely shocked when I got the breaking news text on Sunday about what Macron did. I mean, I think it just goes to show you, and we'll talk about it more in my story, that there's a lot happening in the world right now. And there's some craziness everywhere. And kind of what's funny is we think the crazy is everywhere else, when in reality, though, we got plenty of crazy here too. So I think this French story is very interesting.
I have 2 questions, actually. You brought a lot out of me on that segment, Jack. A lot out of me. So I'll just keep it to 2 questions. It's a little bit controversial, the first question, but just let's be real here. And this is proven, okay? World leader corruption. This is proven. There's no guess here. There's no tinfoil hat. But would you say that the world leader corruption is actually what's leading to the war and not the civilians?
How do I address this softly? Who wins when we fight? And my friend Mario Ineco over at Mineco 64, really smart guy, very well read. He has a common saying. I'm not sure if it's his original quote or not, but he says all wars are banker wars. And basically, no matter who wins, the banks win, right? Because they finance the wars, they finance the construction, and obviously, the military-industrial complex is a big factor too, right? We're having the big discussion about sending F-16s to Ukraine and whether or not, we should or shouldn't. And I don't want to weigh in on whether or not we should or shouldn't. But when you read about all the countries that are considering sending F-16s and the number of these F-16s, which are older 4th generation fighters, still very capable aircraft, but everybody who's considering sending a certain number of F-16s to Ukraine, those same countries are ordering a nearly identical number of 5th generation F-35s from Lockheed Martin. So who's really benefiting here? Banks, military industrial complex. There's a lot of money being thrown around. And, look, I'm no fan of Vladimir Putin. The man scares me. He's not somebody I think should be trifled with. I feel for what the average Ukrainian is going through. But at the same time, the Ukrainian government is every bit as corrupt as our government and the Russian government and everybody else. So I'm really of the position that they all suck. And no matter who wins, we pay the price.
Okay, very good. I'm working on some questions here. Tiggs got one. Tiggs, if you can ask your question again, brother. I couldn't find it from before about Apple, but it's something this. Can you talk about, Jack? Do you personally, and we'll move to the questions. I'm just waiting. Are you personally worried about the integration between Apple and what is it? Is it OpenAI? Is it OpenAI or ChatGPT? Are you worried about that AI program gaining the data? Because Apple has been like, we're so secure, we won't let you jailbreak into our phones, even if the DOJ issues a war, whatever. Apple's like, you can't get our data. And so now opening up AI, they don't even own this. Isn't that a concern, Jack?
I have so many concerns about what's going on at OpenAI and Sam Altman. Sam Altman, besides the fact that he creeps me out. There's a lot of disturbing allegations about him I'm not going to get into because they're right now unfounded, and I don't want to try someone in the court of public opinion. But there's also plenty we do know about him. Like, he asked Scarlett Johansson to use her voice for their chatbot, and she said no, and he did it anyway. This is a man who takes what he wants when he doesn't get the answer that he wants. There's also stories about how he is just lying to his board of directors, and that's why they tried to fire him. The wording they used was he is less than forthcoming or not quite candid. He's a liar. The board of directors at OpenAI found out that ChatGPT was being released to the public via Twitter. How does the CEO of a company launch via and not tell the board of directors? And that's besides the fact that OpenAI is supposed to be a nonprofit group. It was founded as a nonprofit, and then somehow this turned into a multi-billion-dollar for-profit entity that's now almost entirely controlled by Microsoft, because when the board of directors tried to regain control from Sam Altman, Microsoft threatened to hire the whole company, and it ended up being now Microsoft controls the company. And now, their safety people are quitting, freaking a lot of people out. There's a meme called "What Did Ilya See?" referring to Ilya Sutskever, who was the head of the super alignment team, the person who's in charge of making sure AI is safely and responsibly developed, whatever that means, I don't know. But he saw something that made him quit, and they replaced him with a former NSA director. And guys, it's the 2020s. We don't need a tinfoil hat to have a problem with that. All right. I'm not attacking General Nakasone personally, right? The guy served his country, and he stood on the wall against foreign adversaries who attack us daily on cyberspace. So I'm not saying the guy's automatically a bad guy, but this is not somebody whose primary concern is the privacy and the civil rights of American citizens. This guy's primary concern is getting as much information as possible to stop the bad guys. And we need to strike a balance between those two. All the people who are supposed to be on the side of privacy and responsibility are gone, and we're left with Sam Altman and a military guy. That freaks me out a little bit.
Wasn't Gates in DC this week? Wasn't Bill Gates in DC for meetings and no one knew why? I saw that yesterday, I think, or the day before. Yeah.
News to me, but it wouldn't surprise me, Mel.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is a story we keep our eyes on for sure. Sorry, right, Travis, you were saying.
I was saying nothing. I got a couple questions real quick. And if we can make this kind of quick, Jack, we're running a little bit behind. Some of these are a little bit controversial. So let me just start with this one right here. And again, if we could be quick here, this is from Tiggs. Charyan was asking if Apple can still bring in revenue from China if ChatGPT.
I don't see why not. I really don't. Now, Apple's kind of tap dancing a very thin line with China, right? Because China is obviously a very draconian big brother surveillance state, and Apple pretends to care about privacy, at least. So I don't know that ChatGPT is necessarily going to be the straw that breaks that camel's back. I think it'll more be something geopolitical. There's already a lot of backlash against like Tesla and a lot of American companies as in part of the ongoing trade war and obvious geopolitical tension. So I don't think ChatGPT specifically will cause problems in China, but that's not to say Apple won't have plenty of China problems in the near future.
Here's another good one, Jack. This is from K-Pal. Cool picture, K-Pal. Do you think we should have a target inflation rate at 2% at this point?
What's wrong with none? How about no inflation?
How about negative? Anyways, can we have a negative number?
Don't get penalized.
I want to see negative numbers, Jack. I don't want to see positive.
I wouldn't mind seeing negative numbers. The government won't allow it, right? Because negative inflation numbers when you're 34, 37 trillion, who's counting at this point? But when we're so in debt, if we have deflation, then the national debt becomes even more insurmountable. If we have inflation, the national debt becomes easier to handle because the trillions of dollars we owe is now less valuable. So the government is incentivized to create inflation. That 2% target, that is the precise setting on the stove that will keep that frog from jumping out of the pot. And that's why they target 2%. The average person doesn't realize they're being robbed by inflation at 2%.
But Jack, that's only if the government stopped printing money and spending a deficit, correct?
Well, that's
Because
their
what
target, right? Will we achieve
what I'm
it?
saying is they're working against themselves right now. Would you agree with that? They're fighting
When you say
inflation.
there's two major players in the inflation situation right now, right?
The
You
Fed?
got the Fed and the Treasury. The Treasury is definitely working against the Fed's efforts to bring in inflation. Yes.
Exactly. Do you think they should reconsider? It's the second part of his question because he thinks it's moronic. Hopefully, he's not talking about me, or else. I mean, no. Anyways, no, I'll shut up. Johnny messed me up because he sent me a picture of his dog Logan with peanut butter, and we should reconsider. Do you think it should be redone how they're calculating it?
There's a fantastic website called Shadow Stats run by a guy named John Williams, and they keep track of inflation based on the same consistent methodology. That more so than I think we should change the way we measure it year over year. We should stop changing what we're counting. They make these regular hedonic adjustments. They say they substitute things in and out. You know, they say, oh, if there's a digital clock on a washing machine, the old one used to have an analog clock, and therefore that's an upgrade. And so an increase in the price isn't inflation. It's a better product. And so they pencil whip it out of inflation, and they do these little things over and over again, hundreds of times a year. They make these little subtle adjustments that hides the true increase in the cost of living. That needs to change.
All right. That is a wrap. Okay. Good job, Jack. Appreciate that story, buddy. Appreciate it. I think they did too. I think they appreciate it. You guys, we're going to move on to Melody. Keep your questions coming at the end of her story. We'll pull up your questions. But Melody, you, miss, are in the hot seat. Hope you enjoy it.
Okay. So this has been called the year of the election because there are so many elections across the world. I've heard this slide says 64, but I've heard it's really more like 80. So this is the year of the election. We've already had quite a few, but I think this is why a lot of people think that this year has the potential to be very disruptive. Not sure if you guys have read The Fourth Turning, guys in the audience, Travis, Jack, but essentially the idea is that we are in a very tumultuous time because it's the turning over of the generation. But Jack, Travis, have you guys read that book? The Fourth Turning.
I have been reading that book for many months right now. It's a tough read, but I actually, it's on my shelf right above me here, but
Okay, excellent.
I have not finished it yet.
I know you've told me to read the book several times. I have not read the book.
Okay, it is fine. But essentially this book is just kind of the idea is it's that, you know, you basically turn over every 80 years this from the knowledge of what the prior generations knew. And so we're kind of entering into this fourth turning when there's going to be turmoil, you know, around the world. So that really is what this year is cracked up to be. And we can see just how much of the entire world is going to be embroiled, almost, you know, half of it. You can see this map here. So, you know, it's going to be and has already been very interesting as we're talking about. So I just kind of want to run around the world real quick with what's happened and what's going to happen. So, you know, we kind of think about here in the U.S., all of our the drama that is our politics. But in reality, this is happening all over the world as well. So like in January, Bangladesh, mass arrest in the lead up, and there was a big crackdown on the opposition there. Voter turnout, only 40%. In Taiwan, we know that the leader that was elected there did not make Beijing very happy. They were angered by this. And of course, this is important in terms of the potential conflict between us and China. And I won't go through all of these, but just hitting the highlights. So in Finland, you basically had the center-right won an election runoff. And what we're seeing is a big shift all over the world to the right. In February, they got the guy that won their thumping victory happened. This guy, he was known for cracking down on the gangs, and his second term is unconstitutional. So things are going well there. In Haiti, there are actually no more elected officials right now since the assassination. And I'm not laughing at the situation, obviously, but since the assassination of the president in 2021, in Pakistan, the party of the jailed former prime minister won the most votes. Okay, so I hope we're kind of seeing a theme here. It's but they're forming a coalition. Hopefully, things will be okay there. In Indonesia, the person it hasn't been decided, but the person that was going to win was accused of kidnapping and torture in the 1990s. So we've got quite a cast of characters across the world. In March in Iran, lowest voter turnout since 1979. They very much kind of crack down on who even gets to run. And then, of course, we had Russia in March with Putin claimed victory there. According to the Russian government, a landslide victory at over 87%. And highest voter turnout, this is what they're telling us anyway, of 74% in history. And of course, his opposition died mysteriously in a Siberian prison a month prior to the election. In Ukraine, you guys might know there were no elections because of martial law. And so the democracy we are sending money to at the moment did not hold elections. And then in April, this was a big shock to everybody. Not so much. So this is India. People have been talking about India as the next big, global hope. But I have worked very closely with companies in India, spent a lot of time over there, and had always kind of looked at that with suspicion based on the way that I know things go there. But essentially, Modi, who's been in rule for quite some time, they did not get the support there that they thought they were going to get. And I honestly, guys, when you look at India, you have to realize that in reality, so much of their workforce is actually working for Western companies. So in the mortgage industry in particular, most of the back end is done in India. And so as mortgage and housing have come under stress here, that's also having implications in India. A lot of my former teammates over there have told me that Western companies have not made payroll and things like that. So we need to keep that in to consideration when everybody kind of talks as India as the next best hope. In April, so also we had South Korea unseated President I'm sorry, I won't be able to say this, Yoon Suk Yeol, after a scandal over a Dior bag. Okay. So, this is the state of world politics. Panama, the president there, they essentially won, but was barred after the person that they beat was barred after being handed an 11-year sentence for money laundering. So everything's going well there. And then this is a big story so in my other life, I used to study post-colonial nations, their economies, politics. And so in South Africa, this is kind of a big deal. The African National Congress lost the majority for the first time in 30 years. So this, and there's a lot of accusations of corruption. If you study that area, that has been going on for some time, but there's a real shift of power here. And guys, this may be boring running through these countries, but I think that I just kind of want everyone to get a sense of what's going on around the world and how these things are kind of tied together and could have impact to our economy. One of the most interesting elections, and I think that we'll probably be talking about this more in the future, was in Mexico. And if for some of you that don't know, Claudia Sheinbaum won there. She's the first woman and the first Jewish president in Mexico. She's a left-wing climate scientist, was the former mayor of Mexico City. I think this is going to make for an interesting few years in terms of, what's going on with immigration, some of the efforts of nearshoring in Mexico. So this election, more than the most that we've talked about here, I think is going to be the repercussions are going to be very interesting to watch. And then, as Jack was saying, in the European Parliament, a big shift to the right there. Obviously, with as Jack talked about, Macron's called a snap election, and kind of what was interesting here is he said it was for the good of the people, because politics has gotten so contentious. I mean, that was, in my opinion, just a very paternalistic thing to say that, the people, they need a reset. They can't do it for themselves. So let me do it. This is, guys, if you ever have studied communism, socialism, the idea that your populace is not smart enough to make decisions for themselves, this is something you will see over and over again. And so, take that in mind as you see these guys who, in reality, they're not doing it to help us. They're not doing it to maintain democracy. They're doing it because they don't want to lose power. And so that's important to remember. And guys, Travis and Jack, stop me if there's a country you kind of want to talk about more. So I think it's going to be very important to watch what happens in France over the next couple of weeks, or the next month or so, because the backlash will be and the fallout from a decision like this is going to be a really good case study. And so you saw this big move to the right in Europe. And then in Iran, essentially, you've got 6 candidates, that very closed down election. And we know there, and this is a big deal that I don't know about you guys, but when I was getting prepared for this segment, the fact that we didn't hear more after this guy was killed in the helicopter crash is kind of interesting. And it was funny, as I was getting ready, I had to remind myself, like, this was a big story that I just don't feel like I've heard a lot about. So Jack or Travis, if you know more, and then I just had to kind of put Mongolia in here, Jack, since it was in both of our stories, and, very curious about some missing medals and all of that. And so, this time around, they've actually expanded their, folks that they're electing from 76 to 126. So really trying to diversify government. So Jack, I think there's something going on in Mongolia that we probably just need to do a deep dive story on. And then, so that's, what's going to happen in June. And then as we get to July, we've got the UK. So I'm butchering all of these names, and I'm sorry, but Sunak is really behind in polls. And a Labor victory here would put an end to 14 years of Tory rule. And I just heard a fantastic interview with Grant Williams and Michael Ferris on Coffee and a Mic, just talking about how the Conservative Party has just really gone so far off the rails in the UK. And then, won't go through all of these. I'll mention in October, Austria, their far right party is leading the polls there. They've finally gotten back on track since the Ibiza scandal, which included some conversation in dark alleys with daughters of Russian oligarchs. But, again, making light, but this really is a soap opera across the world, and not just here in the United States. But, the United States in November, need we say more? We know that this is going to be a very contentious election. And, here on this channel, we've been talking about how we can cover these things fairly and without, creating a lot of drama, because we need this information. But at the same time, it can be very divisive. So essentially, the big news here, guys, is we're seeing a shift to the far right. We're also seeing a lot of this cast of characters. Nobody has a real clean bill of health. There's accusations of election rigging, gang activity, money laundering, Dior bag gifts. So this is quite a cast of characters. And honestly, it reminds me a lot of back during right around the Asian tiger crisis. This just feels very familiar, which happened, of course, right before we had the stock market debacle in 2000. So a lot of information, but just kind of wanted to go around, give people a perspective of what's going on around the world.
I think that was great. Thank you, Melody. I'm going to take back the screen. I have a question for you.
Okay.
And I have some really good questions as well, but here's the thing. It's about the US. Okay. So I live in the United States. Everyone on the show right now lives in the United States. Are we being lied to? Yeah, we are being lied to. Are we being manipulated? Yes, we are being manipulated. But would you agree with this statement, Melody? Okay. The statement being, thank God we still live in America because there's still hope left. Would you agree with that statement, and why or why not?
I do. I agree with that statement. And I think, when I was a young, useful idiot, before I had traveled, before I had a lot of ire for the United States. In many ways, the way a lot of these folks who are, throwing things on paintings, and I mean, you get caught up, you feel passionate about injustice, and you're also young, and you have a lot of energy, and my point is that you get caught up in these ideas. And I used to believe the US was so bad, and just was the worst country on the planet. And which is crazy. And then I went off. I lived in Taiwan. I lived in Spain. I lived all over the world. And what I realized very quickly is I wanted to be back in my country. And I know that a lot of people have talked about right now becoming expats, leaving the US. What I would say to you is these problems are all over the world. We, in my opinion, and of course, I come from a very privileged perspective, having grown up here, we have natural resources. We have the foundation of what I believe is a good recipe for a functioning government. And so I would rather be here than anywhere else. And that might just be because I don't know about everywhere else, but I will say of the experiences I've had, I am a fan of the US, our natural resources, and our possibility of what we can achieve if we actually just, stop being ridiculous. Sorry.
That was good. Jack, question? Good.
I'm noticing some similar trends emerging in all these, at least in the global north, if we'll say, or maybe even in the G7 countries. There seems to be a lot of pushback against, I guess, the reclaiming of sovereignty. Maybe not nationalist, populist party. People want to reclaim their sovereignty. They don't want to be beholden to international agreements or the European Union or NATO. You seeing a lot more nationalism. I'm seeing a lot of pushback against things like open borders and climate policy and military interventions abroad. So it seems like a lot more of a deglobalization trend, at least among the G7 and the Western countries. Now, while that's going on, I'm also seeing a lot of things like the BRICS countries in the global south are becoming a little more globalized, aligning themselves more tightly together, again, in a pushback against the G7. So, if I'm looking for one common theme in everything you just described, Melody, and there may be some outliers here and there, it seems to be the pushback against the center-left ruling parties or ruling uniparty in the West seems to be the one consistent theme that I'm seeing across the board here. People want to take control of their lives back. They don't want to turn their control of their lives over to bureaucrats in other countries.
And I would agree with that. I think they're kind of voting for law and order as well. Like, I think that the pendulum always swings, right? From very far on one side to very far on the other side. And that's one of the reasons I just mentioned Austria as well, just because it's very prevalent part in history for a specific world war. It's these little places, these little things, these little battles that really can start triggering greater events. But I agree, Jack. I think people they don't want people to tell them, what they can say, what they can't say, and as much as it might have felt okay for a little while, I think that all of this progressive politics has really the backlash is coming, because at the end of the day, when you don't feel safe just going out to your car, you don't feel safe doing your daily activities because of there is no law and order, then that's going to take precedence over, some of these liberal politics, like, not calling someone, like all of us being afraid to speak. Basically, the reason why I'm struggling with my words is because I'm self-censoring as I'm talking, because I know if I say this incorrectly, there's going to be backlash. And I think we're all doing that so much now, we can't even interact.
Well said.
All right, we got about 5 more minutes in this segment, and it's not the 30 minutes. I got that wrong last time. That was on me, Melody. Sorry about that. That wasn't Jack. I blamed him. I don't think I blamed him. I think I just took ownership. But some good questions here. Let's start with Tony. Again, I got about 4 or 5. I don't know how much time we'll have, Melody. Oh, that was the wrong one. Where's Tony? Tony, here we go. I'm so sorry. Hold on one second. Where is it? It just disappeared. I hit the wrong button. Oh my God. I can't believe I hit the wrong button. All right. I'm going to pull up. Basically it was this. Okay. I apologize. I cleared the question, but the question was this, and do you agree with this, Melody? Someone mentioned it's not about Republican. It's not about Democrat. It's the 0.0001% of the rich versus us. Would you agree with that? And why or why not?
100%. I agree with that. And that is, what we talked about when we talked about immigration. I mean, it is just the very small percentage of people that are in power do not want to lose power. And in my last segment, we'll talk about that. We'll look at how consumer sentiment has been bad for a very long time. And that has to do with the fact that we don't have an avenue for everyone to find middle class existence anymore, and so our future is not bright, and that's the way it looks. So yeah, anyway, go ahead, Trav.
And quickly, here's another good one right here from G-Wan, and I appreciate all your comments, G. We see you in the comment section. How does media coverage impact public perception and voter behavior during elections, Melody?
Well, unfortunately, I think now it just makes everybody angry. I think that, the algos and the marketers have figured out that the way they get more clicks is by, basically making us all very angry and mad at one another. And so I think that during an election, that just goes on steroids.
Well said. I mean, you're giving me goosebumps. I got one more just for the sake of time. Really good comment right here. This has to do with what you were saying about research, Melody, and how we really need to do more research. Maybe the public's not, but this is it saying, unfortunately, most people will not expand their energy to do real research to find other points of view. In other words, people will stay comfortable, and if they hear something that they like, they will accept it and not ask why. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think that that's a combination of people are too busy just trying to live. I mean, we've seen in the jobs data how people are taking on second and third jobs because, they can't pay their bills. And so when all you have time to do is work and maybe say hello to your children, it's very difficult to do this kind of research. I think that, speaking for the three of us, I think that is what we are trying to do, is to give you guys this information based on the deep research that we have been doing, because folks don't have time. And then the other side of that, though, is that I think people are afraid. I mean, as humans, so we have, genetic memory. There's all kinds of scientific studies about that. And the idea of being rejected from the pack is all within us, deep within us. We may not think that's what we're thinking, but every time we have those reactions that feel like anger or fear, a lot of times these days, just anger, that's really fear of being rejected from the pack and getting kicked out. And that's primordial fear. And so, but we don't understand that's what's happening. And so there's a fear of hearing about alternative perspectives, because if you jump on that train, you might be kind of doing exiling yourself. And so I think in this society right now, guys, all three of us, even as we're talking, the censorship is so real out there, because everyone is just afraid of being canceled and saying the wrong thing. And that is not a society that will ever be productive or fruitful.
And you're 100% right, Melody. I'll throw this comment up. I want to ask you guys this at the end of the video. But I mean, to your point, yeah, people are a fear, even our viewers, even our man G Wen. I mean, he said it's so stressful hearing these things. But because we have a great community, look at what Nikki said to him. God's in control.
That's right.
There's nothing done behind closed doors that isn't known. Look at the community. The community is so touching. But other than that, you guys, that's a wrap. Is that right, Melody? Do you guys want to say anything else on that segment?
I'm good.
Good note to end
Okay.
on. I can't top that. Well said.
I mean, and again, we'll ask that question here at the end, because I don't want people to leave this show in just being scared, right? Like, well, we'll talk about solution, and, and Nikki really covered it. I didn't want to offend people and get religious, but I'm definitely religious. I forgot to pray before we started. I'm so sorry. We guys, we pray every time before we start, and I usually ask to lead, and I completely forgot. I feel like a failure.
We had a little rough start today. That's okay though. We're human.
Yes. All right. Let me just put these notes here. All right, guys. So we're going to move on to the next segment. I'm going to throw up my screen a little bit differently here. Okay. So I'm going to have to put it like this, and I'm going to move myself here, and I'm going to ask for a little bit of participation from Melody and Jack, because this is going to be a housing market update. We're going to ask the question, is right now what's going on in the housing market worse than 2022? Because remember, you guys, I'm bringing 2022 up because it's the most recent year of official price decline. We did not, however, end 2022 down. And the reason we didn't end median sales price down in 2022 is because, remember, we didn't even start quantitative tightening until the end of the first quarter of 2022. So 2022 was off to a massive start of equity, appreciation is my point. So we're going to take a look at this. All right. And let me make sure that I'm doing this correctly so the viewers can also see that. You guys like that trick? It took me about 10 minutes to learn how to do that, because I want to be able to write on this. Am I impressing you, Melody, yet or no? Okay. And I was going to ask, why can't I also do a story on Mongolia? I can't even pronounce it. Why is it only you and Jack gets to do that story?
I think
even
that
ask
should
me
be
to
your
do the story.
story. I think that's it. You next week, Mongolia. It's all you.
All right. Mongolia next week. Sounds good. All right, you guys. So we're going to look at the most recent Redfin article right here, and we're going to tear this apart a little bit. And I'm going to ask the opinions of Melody and Jack on a couple of these things. But let's look at the article title first of all. U.S. home prices hit another record high because they revised it downward. Remember, in 2022, which we're comparing, the record high was about $2 shy of 400,000. So the only reason we're hitting a record high, first of all, guys, is because they revised the record downward. You get it? If they keep revising the data, then they can create any narrative that they want, and they can do it legally because it's proprietary information. All right. But the name of this is U.S. home prices hit another record high, but mortgage rates are starting to decline, which could give buyers relief. Oh my gosh. Is our mortgage rate starting to decline? Here, I got the mortgage rates right here, you guys. Here they are right here. So the average mortgage rate right now, according to Mortgage News Daily, as of Friday, is 6.99%. So mortgage rates are down about 15 basis points. I'm going to tell you guys right now, as a loan officer of 2 decades, 15 basis points ain't going to do nothing. It's only going to mess your head up. 15 basis point drop on your mortgage rate will do absolutely nothing for your debt to income ratio. It's just messing with your heads. Talking about media manipulating, it's messing with people's heads regardless. Let's get a couple things going here. I'm going to read 2 quotes right here. The first quote is right here. The latest, and we're going to start right here, guys. Just make sure you can see that. And I'm only going to read these 2 paragraphs, and then we'll start doing data visualization. But the latest inflation report is good. It's good for homeowners. Wow, is that great? So the latest inflation report is good for home buyers because it has already sent mortgage rates down. So more foolish and reckless optimism. I just showed you guys the rates went down about 15 basis points. So that's BS. But on the other side of the coin, if lower mortgage rates bring back more demand than supply, that could erase the possibility that home price growth softens and pushes prices up further. So I wanted to get you guys' opinions on that. Okay. Now, and here's what I wanted to ask you guys. There's 2 forms of rate cuts. Okay. There's the rate cuts that mess with people's heads. That's a quarter rate cut that really is not going to change anything. And then there are drastic rate cuts that need to happen because they need to stimulate the economy. Those are 2 different sets of rate cuts. One's BS and the other is, oh my God, we messed up. So Jack, can you start by just explaining on your opinion on what would happen right now if they cut rates a quarter basis point like the market thinks?
Well, for things like commercial real estate, a quarter basis point rate cut, not going to do anything. And to be honest with you, I think commercial real estate is arguably the biggest problem in our financial system right now. So the rate cuts, too little, too late when it comes to CRE. I think that ship has sailed and it's only a matter of time. We are seeing things lately with things like the mortgage index and the refi index, where we are getting an outsized move in home buyer activity off of a little bit of a drop in interest rates. We've seen that several weeks in a row with the mortgage datas and the mortgage applications. Rates drop a little bit, people pile into the housing market. So unfortunately, the data is pretty convincing, in my opinion, that says if they lower rates, home prices are going higher. And we're looking at 4 consecutive months where shelter inflation and specifically owner's equivalent rent was 0.4% month over month. All right. Now, I don't know. I didn't do the math what that is annualized, but shelter inflation never came down. People have been saying it's going to come down. It's going to come down. It hasn't. And if they're talking about cutting rates, it's going to go up. So unfortunately, everything the Fed is doing, everything Wall Street seems to think they're going to do is saying home prices higher when they're already unaffordable.
Yeah.
Melody?
So one thing I just want to bring up. I'm seeing, like you, Jack, the increases in applications, both purchase and refi, which different activity there, very different. Refi is more about showing a sign of financial stress, but what is happening is your pull-through rate is decreasing. So Optimal Blue is the pricing engine everybody uses for mortgages. And so what's happening is it might generate interest, but unfortunately, what I don't think it's going to result in is actually increased mortgage origination. What's happening is people are not qualifying and they're falling through the process. They're also doing, Travis, I think you shared this when we were live as well, so I'll say it. But Travis shared a story about his insurance where he was thinking about putting an offer on a house. And once he got the insurance bill, he was like, no, done. And what I'm hearing about in the industry are people are getting right to the last minute. They're getting that final insurance quote and they're saying, I can't, goodbye. And so I do think, just like we saw at the beginning of the year back in December when rates started, the Fed didn't do anything except for, talk about their expectations. And we saw the 10-year start to come down. Some people thought that was yield curve control. I think maybe, but essentially that's what's going to impact your mortgage rate. And so I honestly think that, yes, we might get a bubble of activity. Similar, right. If you think back to 2010, we got a bubble of refinances that kept things going at my company for just a little bit longer. But I don't even think we're going to get that much. We'll get some activity here, but at the end of the day, it's not going to persist. And I honestly believe that the increases we've seen this year in home prices. So I did a study of the past 25 years, and seasonally that happens every year. It happened in 2008, 2009, 2010. And so I think we are just experiencing the seasonal plus a lot of hype. And I think, we'll get around the corner of the season to July, August, and we'll start seeing this direction change. And I think that, but the narrative out there, and Jack, something I was thinking about, that mortgage credit availability index as well. And I want to go look at how that's actually constructed, because last night I was just thinking to myself, what if it's more available credit because they're not actually able to give credit? And so because people aren't qualifying. And so I want to go look at the way that credit index is actually constructed, because I think we might be getting some false signals here.
I mean, I know we're getting false. We know we're getting false signals. I mean, look at the reaction of the market, even if it's no matter the news, it's always wanted to rally. But Melody, I hope the viewers really got what you were saying. So in other words, okay, what do we see in headlines, guys? 9% up week over week. Like, oh my God, people are coming back in. The rates are 6.99. Let's celebrate. It's time to celebrate, guys. But the thing that I'm trying to explain to people, those people are foolish. It's changed almost nothing. It's only down, again, I circled right here. It's only down 20 basis points. To have an increase of 9% only means that the week prior was even more dead. So it's even when there's a little sign of life, it looks like, oh my God, this giant increase, but it's only looking like that for, again, two reasons. One, people have and run on assumptions that are wrong. Okay. 20 basis points will almost do nothing. There's still taxes, insurance, credit cards, all kinds of stuff go into your debt to income ratio. So a 9% increase with a 20 basis point drop is completely ridiculous. And to Melody's point, and here's the beautiful thing about what Melody is saying and being on the back end, people can apply all they want. Right? They're filling out an application. That does not mean that the loan was closed. And to give you guys some of my experience, when I was a loan officer, an in-house loan officer in Keller Williams, I would have to go through about 15 applications to get one approved. I helped so many people. My corporate office came in, had a special meeting with me and said, Travis, you got to start charging people for credit reports because you're spending $5,000 a month. I was spending $5,000 a month pulling people's credit. And I'm like, I'm still going to do it. There's no way in hell I'm going to charge someone that doesn't have any money to help them. I'm like, how does that make any sense? But anyways, guys, if you fill out an application, it's just an application. And so don't hold your breath in these headlines. Now I'm going to go down here. And despite that application increase, here's what I want to show you guys. Okay. The daily average interest rate is sitting at 6.98. Now I started right here. Okay, because it's comparing year over year, and we're getting very close. Again, is it worse than 2022? Well, so far it has. The start of 2024 has started out tighter than 2022, but we are now getting close to the restrictions of the second half of 2022 when we had depreciation, we had deflation in the housing market. All right, but again, we're not there yet, but we're getting very close, and that's why I circled that. Now, the weekly average is 6.99, again, up year over year. That's the important things. But look at how bad demand is. Despite the headlines that you're saying, mortgage purchase applications are actually down year over year 12%. So even though it's up week over week 9, it's still down double digits year over year. It's still taking a massive hit. Same thing with demand. Okay, so again, we see headlines, resilient housing market, things are doing good, but demand is down 18%. It's not, the housing market's not doing well. If you're an agent, if you're a loan officer, you know these things. Google homes for searches for sale. Look at, again, down 16%. The housing market's running on fumes. I mean, it's running so on fumes, you guys. I don't even know why there's not more cities that are showing decline other than the manipulation of data. But let's move forward here. Okay, I'm going to show you guys the winners and losers, and I want to ask your guys' opinion on why. First of all, what you're looking at is on the left side, you're looking at the metros with the highest year-over-year increase in median sales price. Okay, so again, median sales price. This is not an indication of value. This is an indication of trend. Okay, indication of trend. This is not value. Median is not value, just trend. But take a look at the winners. The winners are Anaheim at an increase of 16.8% year-over-year. Newark. Can never pronounce that. I'm not going to even try. I don't even care. I'm going to intentionally mispronounce it. So
if you're from New Jersey, Travis, it's Newark. Newark is how you pronounce it, but Newark if you're from New Jersey.
I'm still not going to pronounce it correctly. And then the third one is New Brunswick, New Jersey. That's up 15.5%. Nashua is up 14.6%. San Jose up 13%. Now, I have my ideas why these metros are up. Can I get you guys' opinion quickly, starting with Melody, on why you think that those specific metro areas are up and not down?
Well, they're areas with a much higher median income, Travis. These are areas where our top 10% coalesce. So that is why we are seeing, and when the only transactions that are happening are those higher price homes, which we've seen, we've seen it in the new home construction survey. We've seen it in the NAR existing home data. It's the million plus homes that are transacting. And so, of course, that's going to make home prices look higher. So, zip code.
Okay. Jack, what do you think? Good one, Melody.
I see a lot of mature areas in there, like Newark, New Brunswick. There's just nowhere left to build in these areas, so it's hard to get new supply into market. You also have people by the busload are just being dropped into these markets right now from, we'll say, southerly ports of entry. So that's contributing. I think areas like Anaheim, California, Melody's idea about upper income, certainly Nassau County, absolutely playing a role there. That's just where the wealthy, who are doing a lot better now because of inflation, makes the wealthy disproportionately better. I think they can afford to bid up the prices of those homes there. But these are also not very nice places to live, like Newark, New Jersey. I mean, the only reason I've ever been to Newark was because I'm getting on a plane, and I get in and out of that town as fast as I can, and I just hope I don't get lost. Fun fact, it's the car theft capital of the country.
Okay. So basically what we have is a luxury. So people are well off, and we know that the higher end of median is kind of not flourishing, but it's growing at a faster pace than the bottom end of the median, which is not growing. And plus we have a lack of supply, especially when it comes to new homes. I mean, in Anaheim, California, they are building new homes, but those new homes are anywhere from 700,000 on up to the millions. So you're boxing out anyone on anywhere close to minimum wage. You're boxing all of that out. And I would agree with you on that. Now let's go on to the losers. All right, here's the loser group. We now have 4 metros. This is the most amount of metros we've had since the home buying season of this year. On this list, actually the entire year, I believe, we have Austin at number 1 at 3.5% down, which is saying something, guys, because remember, Austin has been crashing. Okay, don't get scared. I'm just going to write crashing for the haters. I'm going to circle that. Austin has been crashing since 2022. So the fact that it's still crashing and now boom in 2024, that year-over-year decline tells us that it's still crashing, right? Because it's a year-over-year. But Austin's down 3.5%. That is the highest decline in 2024 so far. Number 2 is Fort Worth, Texas at 2. That's actually impressive. 2.5. These are actually way bigger than last week. Fort Worth is down 2.5%. San Antonio down 1.1%. That is 3 metro areas in Texas. I have my own beliefs. Now the 4th one, look at the lonely little Portland right here. Lonely little Portland wanted to join the group. Well, welcome, Portland, Oregon. You're now on the year-over-year price decline list. I guess the bulls were wrong about home price growth. Who could have known? But I have a question for you guys. Outside of Portland, looking at just the 3 metro areas in Texas, Austin, Fort Worth, and San Antonio, why do you believe Texas's top metro areas, most of their top metro areas, minus Houston, why do you guys think that they're on the year-over-year price decline list? Starting with Jack.
Travis, I think you've done a fantastic job on your channel, Real Estate Mindset, documenting this. The road trips you and Melody took were fantastic. They just overbuilt. They built so many new subdivisions. They're flooding the market with supply. You've documented extensively the shadow inventory, how they're hiding the homes from MLS. And it's the Big Short. It's the alligator in the swimming pool, right? They just built all these massive areas, a lot of motivated people. Don't worry, it's just a little gully. There's so much supply, and these regions is where that narrative of no supply falls on its face. And it's another reason why local is so important.
Okay. 100% overbuilt. Texas is the number 1 state of new home building. And that's an underreported number, by the way. I hope Melody and I prove that we've literally spent tens of thousands of dollars and drove tens of thousands of miles to try to prove this to the viewers. Now, Melody, that was exactly what I was looking for as far as Texas, but look at Portland. What do you think is going on with Portland? What's going on in Portland, Oregon that would cause them to be on this list, do you think?
They also have had a lot of inventory come online, Travis. I haven't spent as much time as I have on Texas, but similar themes: overbuilding around the big cities there. Overbuilding with multifamily. And also just, I think Portland, like a lot of the Pacific Northwest, used to be a destination everybody wanted to go, and they've seen those demographic trends reverse. But I do want to talk about Texas just a little bit. And interesting to see Fort Worth in there, because we just saw an article this week about last week, institutional ownership in Fort Worth. And I have a feeling that some of that long-term rental is being dumped onto the market right now because you've got institutional net selling. But the other thing I'll say about Fort Worth and its proximity to Dallas, which both you and I was just helping a friend out looking up addresses in Plano, believe it or not. I looked up like 30 addresses in Plano, and what I can see, they're all cutting prices. And so my point is that a month ago, everybody said Dallas was on fire again. And, Dallas and Fort Worth, very close together in proximity. But just looking at Plano in particular, where everybody said it was hot, 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 looking at all these addresses, and they're doing price cuts like all over the place. And then what I was doing for this person was comparing them to the assessed value. So like, what's the actual market value according to the appraiser, the county appraiser? And everybody's still listing about 30 to 50,000, over that value. And so, that's how we can come down so far, is that people are relying on their Zestimate versus what the county's even telling you what your market value is. And there's different ways they do all that. But my point is, until you list, you can't believe what you think that home value is, because it's all about what you can sell it for.
I want to tell you something, Melody, and this may be a surprise to you. In Houston, it's the opposite now. I'm finding several properties where the assessed value, Melody, is $50,000, $60,000 over market value, which means the county appraisal district is robbing the homeowner. If they're being charged an assessed value of $300,000, I could show you. You know what? I'm going to show you the house before I end this segment. No, I mean, before we end this video, I'm going to pull up the house. I'm going to show you guys the assessed value is way higher than what they could sell it for. And it's a fractional owner. It's fractional ownership being sold for under market value, but it doesn't cash flow because I didn't fight and protest the value. It's so much higher. I'm talking about a $230,000 house with about an $8,000 a year tax liability. $230 house, you guys, with a near $8,000 tax liability per year. That's nuts. So I'm going to show you that before we end, okay? But I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to stay on a truck right here.
Can I just touch on Portland real quick? There's one thing that I got to say. Portland is this little microcosm of, I'll just say it, freaking communism in the United States. What's going on in Portland is disgusting. The urban blight, businesses are being smashed. There's no law and order. And look, history has shown people will climb over razor wire, dodge machine gun fire, turn a 1950s Chevy into a raft, and try to cross 90 miles of open ocean to escape communism. You think people won't accept 1% less for their house to escape communism? So I think absolutely local politics in Portland is driving people out of that city because it's turning into a cesspool. That's got to be playing a role there.
That was hardcore, bro. You're going to get
maybe I struck a nerve there, but so sue me.
Yeah. No, don't sue us, guys. Sue Jack. Don't sue us. All right, I'm going to actually, you know what? Because Jack kind of lit some fire underneath me. Let me just do this. You see how I just turned that? Is that badass or what? All right, I'm going to show you guys the property I'm talking about. Okay, I may have to pull up the county records as well to show you, but let me just zoom in because I should know exactly. It's like right around here. Where is it? Oh my gosh. I should have put my filters on first to find this bad boy. Here it is. Got it. Take a look, guys. Okay, so it's for sale for $230. You see that right here, yeah? $230. See? DOM 44. So I got 44 days on the market. Listed price is $230. Let me see if it gives us our market values. It does not. But you see the taxes right here? $7,200. So what I want to do is, if you guys really want to know what's going on, you got to go to your county assessor office. So let me just verify real quick. This is in Harris County. So what I'm going to do is, let me show you. So remember, And if you guys are doing research on buying a house, this is exactly what you should do. You go to your county appraisal district. Okay, it's hcat.org in Harris County. All right, you go to property search. Okay, just like this, and you just copy and paste the address. Take the drive out. Okay, because they're really sensitive about that. Okay, here it is right here. Okay, this is a fractional ownership. Let me show you what they valued it for. Look at that, SHIT, $318,000. The proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the pudding. You guys see it. Look at this. That's what I'm saying, Melody. It's like, it's so bad, Melody. It's like, it's reversed. That's how bad things are. It is reversed.
Well, and I think that trend is going to happen all over. I mean, I think that's exactly the direction it's going to go. And that's going to be the sucky thing, is all these people are going to get taxed on that assessed value. And then they're probably going to have to pay those same taxes next year, even as values are going down. And Trisha, Florida Sun, talks about this a lot in Florida. That's exactly what happened during the GFC last time.
Bingo. Look at, again, to the viewers, I hope you understand how bad things really are in the market. Things are so reversed and messed up, and data is so manipulated. It's even Melody didn't see this in Houston yet. This is an overvaluation of $88,000, you guys. $88,000. Again, appraisal value from assessment taxes. They're paying taxes $318. Here again, here's the 230. And again, this is, let's see if it shows it on here. I want to see if it showed me fractional ownership under ownership type. But if it's a fractional ownership, that means that they obviously purchased it to make money. And there it is right there. See? Fractional ownership. What does that mean, Melody? Tell the viewers. What does this mean?
I don't know. It's investor. I mean, it's probably an investor property, right? Like a group of investors got together and they all have fractional ownership of it.
Okay. And now they have to sell it for greatly under market value. Why?
Right. Because they're desperate. They're in distress. It's like all these LPs or limited partners we're hearing about that are blowing up all over for multifamily. I mean, and so it's happening in single family as well. I think this is where those private note sales come in. Is like you get a distressed group like this, and they're probably going to find a group just like them to sell it to. And it never makes it to MLS. But, I think honestly, Travis, that's what it's showing. We're seeing all these small mom and pop investors are getting crushed right now.
Destroyed. I mean, absolutely obliterated. The thing is, they're probably selling it because they can't cash flow no more. You shouldn't be paying $7,200 a year on a house that's $230,000. But moving back on, you guys, right now into the data visualization, go ahead and take a look here. We have median sales price right here. Redfin, and again, this is Redfin, is saying it's up 4.4% year over year. They're saying we had a new record, but I drew a dot where the old record was. So that dot is, again, pointing to the 2022 peak. So again, you can see how if they lowered the peak to here, okay, so this is the new peak. This is the old peak. Big difference. Okay. When you lower, and that's what I'm trying to explain it. When you lower the record, when you lower the peak, you can create, if you choose to, maybe they're just too stupid and it appears to be, this whole thing going on. You get to change the narrative. You get to change the narrative. They've adjusted history. Okay. So that's the old peak. There's a new peak. Regardless, look at the trend of median. The trend is going up. So the trend is going up when unaffordability is worse, price cuts are worse, days on market are worse, demand is worse. There's no explanation for that unless you understand that it's the higher end of the median. It's the higher end of the median that we see here. It's the rich people, per se. I mean, to me, they're rich, that are still active in the housing market. Institutional investors, blah, 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 blah. The rich people, we see it. There's no way that prices can go up when we have all these other areas of the laws of supply and demand working in opposite. Go ahead. Yeah.
Quickly, Travis just mentioned something. So, I track 82 cities and I use Redfin for all of my sell data. And of all those 82 cities, the median price month over month, the same data that you're looking at here went up 0.031%. And so I understand that, of course, that's not the whole market, but I have a good chunk of the cities that really are going to move the housing market. And so prices were flat, absolutely flat. And so I think, again, just like you're pointing to, that they want this all-time high. This is all narrative. Sorry to interrupt you, but
I mean, I think it's narrative, but people are like, well, what if it's not a conspiracy? What if they're just that stupid? All right, good, well played, right? And that was Mr. Watson. I'm like, yeah, maybe they're just so stupid. It appears like it's a conspiracy. But let's move on real quick. Take a look at this. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No, so Kenny in our chat right here, who's actually, you remember Jordan from our series on Case Shiller. So he's made this point before, but the two different series, like the weekly series is different than the monthly series with Redfin. And I think he's saying, like the weekly is 400 metros, I believe. And then and KPAL is the monthly more. I think
way more.
Okay.
It's way more.
Yeah. So I think that's part of the reason for the differences as well.
Yeah. The week over week is way, like the month over month. I think it's close to 400. I don't know. I could look at that a little bit later. But moving on, you guys, to median asking price. No, you're good, dude. Interrupt me, please. But only you two, no one else. Jack, why are you being so polite, Jack? Anyway, median asking price, you guys. Generally, median asking prices lead sold price, obviously. So it's really refreshing that we've kind of seen this plateau for the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks. So for the last 7 weeks, at least median sales price has been flattening out. Again, when we look at median, it's not accurate. You got to go hyper local, but nevertheless, look at that trajectory right here, Melody and Jack. I mean, look at this from the start of the year. Look at the trajectory of median asking price. To me, again, that demonstrates the higher end of the median. I can't prove it, and I'll tell the viewers that. But again, when we really step back and look at this stuff logically, there's no other explanation. I mean, if you want to believe them, by all means. But let's just keep going, you guys. Take a look at it. This is crazy. I want to talk a little bit about this one. This is home buyer housing payments is up 8.6% year over year. Okay. And year over year for the viewers, again, is measuring here to here. What I'm looking at is when we compare 2021, you guys, look at 2021 and now. Yeah, it's only up 8.6 year over year, but look at the big picture. In 2021, housing payments were about $1,700. Right now, they're over $2,800, and that's not even what happens when we count taxes and insurance. The housing market is so much more unaffordable than most people realize. It's so much more ungrounded from sustainable fundamentals than people realize. In essence, what would have to happen for affordability to come back to the 30, 50-year averages is interest rates, number one, would have to go to 3%. Okay. If there's not an economic crash and rates go to 3%, the same problem, only worse, is going to happen. Okay, so in other words, if they lower rates too quickly, too soon, let's say, if they lower rates too soon, then what's going to happen to prices? They're going to go up. And if they lower rates and prices go up, then they've just eliminated the rates from affordability. They've put us back into a corner, you guys. They have one opportunity, essentially, and if they lower rates right now, before inflation's under control, we're dead in the water. We're dead in the water. You can't lower rates yet. You just can't. And we see that. The second, so I'm going to take that one off of the table. Maybe it'll be back down to 5%, Melody, Jack, but certainly 3%. There's no way in hell, unless it's a depression and no one can buy a house. Then, okay, go to 3% because no one can buy a house, so it doesn't matter. Number two, income would have to go up 60%. Last time I looked at the job numbers, and we're going to go into that here, we're actually losing full-time jobs. That's being replaced by government jobs. They're doing quantitative tightening. They're monitoring a wage price spiral, which means they don't want us making more money. They have said go ahead.
I'm sorry. If I could comment on that rising payment. There was an article in Bloomberg back in April that said homeowners insurance, I don't know if you knew this or not, is not included in CPI. It does not factor into the inflation reading. And Bloomberg put out an article last month, or based on last month's inflation data, that said homeowners insurance would add an entire 0.8% to the year over year inflation number. So if they actually factored in and homeowners insurance is a major factor in our life, right? Either our mortgage payment or our rent. Either way, we're paying homeowners insurance, whether we realize it or not. So CPI inflation, I just got done saying it was 3.3%. That would be 4.1 if homeowners insurance was included in the inflation math. All right. So again, you're looking at these payments surging. Insurance costs are exploding higher, not just homeowners, insurance, medical, everything. So that's another factor that just doesn't get reported.
How does that make you feel, Jack?
Angry. I don't
You
like
don't
it.
look like
Inflation
it.
is a sinister tax in disguise. It penalizes the poor and the middle class, and it benefits the wealthy. And we have this institutionalized inflationary policy in government, in our banking system, and they all pay lip service and pretend to want to be fighting it, but really they all want it because it makes them wealthy and us less wealthy. And you can see it in this chart. We're not getting more house for this payment. We're not getting a better quality of life. We're just paying more for what we used to be able to live in for a lot less.
And just for the viewers, so they understand what a 3% rate is, that's 400 basis points, okay, of cuts. The market is pricing in 25 this year. So you guys just do the math is all I'm saying. Now the other thing here, I mean, again, yes, income could potentially go up, nominal could potentially go up, but to me, Jack, Melody, it seems the more probable thing here is, and I understand it takes a little bit more time. I understand the cycles. To me, the more probable thing is the prices. So to get back to normal, some type of normalness, prices would have to go down on average 30%. Melody, of these three things, and maybe you don't think we'll ever be back to normal affordability. And if that's the case, just let us know. But what do you think is the most likely correction of these three things? Maybe you think they're equal. What are your thoughts here?
No, I mean, it's home prices. I mean, this is the thing that's what is going to increase our income by 60%, our real income. I mean, that, right now what we're seeing is job losses. We're seeing layoffs every single day. There's a new announcement every single day. There's a new bankruptcy. We'll talk about this in the consumer sentiment story because we'll talk about why sentiment is so low. But income is certainly not. When's the last time we had a 60%?
I don't know. Never.
They
Right.
won't let that happen. They won't let wages rise 60%.
No, exactly. And that, again, when we were talking about trying to take a balanced view of immigration, certainly not the folks who are struggling to get here, not their fault, but our leaders, our elite want immigration so they can make sure that that does not happen. And then from a rate perspective, I think what we should do, Travis, for the next show is really do some walkwards of what that 25 basis point, what we think, how that would drive the 10-year or the mortgage rate and what that actually would do to affordability. I think that would be a really interesting just exercise for everybody. But it's the prices. And, unless we all go in our universal basic income and we all get a ticket and are told where we're going to live, like that's what the future looks like if home prices don't correct back to the mean.
Okay, very good. I'm losing my time. Jack, you want to cover anything? This is an important segment. Anything you want to add before I move on?
I think you guys summarized it very well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And by the way, your hair's looking nice today. I didn't see that earlier. You did something to it? You moisturize? Dude, keep using it.
Spent a lot of time at the salon to achieve this look. Thank you very much.
It's working. Keep spending that money, brother.
You can
I'm just
tell.
kidding. Don't spend that.
These boat trips don't build themselves, Yeah.
All right, let's go back into demand, you guys. Look at pending sales, also down 4% year over year. So, again, the people that are celebrating resilient housing market, it's rebounding, buying demand's going to come back, are full of poo-poo. Like horse poo-poo, not their own. Like they're full of poo-poo. No, the market is worse than it's been since the 1990s. So again, demand's still going down as far as pending sales. Now, here's the good news. New listings are going up, but not at the rate that I would like to see. You guys can see this is the blue line right here. Here's new listings. So we're up year over year. Okay, but I want to acknowledge there is a little bit of play as far as what's called the golden handcuff effect, meaning that if you're a homeowner, you cannot even afford to sell, right? And you see that because even though new listings for homes is going up, and this sucks, this is a golden handcuff, it's not the same pace. So again, you look at the two previous years, 2022 and 2021, normally we're way up here as far as new listings to come to the market. So we're down by about, Melody, I'd say about 20,000-ish per week. about when we compare normal. But again, the demand is not absorbing it. Okay, so
Right.
demand's not absorbing it. Now
That's
let's go to active listings, and you see that here. So here's the data that trumps that last data that we're looking at. This is active listings on the market. We're finally at 900,000. We've been sustained at 900,000. This is a beautiful number. I've been telling my viewers on Real Estate Mindset that if we get to 900,000 and sustain, we should start seeing softening prices. But that's in addition to days on market also being historic, really bad, price cuts being really bad. I mean, we have so many things going on right now that it's going to put pressure on those prices to go down. And in fact, again, they're already going down in some subdivisions in some markets. Months of supply also good, you guys. This is also a 4-year high for this time of year. For the seasonality, it's a 4-year high. We're sitting at 3.2 months. And don't forget that, in 2017, we had, I believe, 3.7 months of inventory. So we're not far off from 2017. Think about what I'm saying to the viewers. We are not far off right now from 2017. So why are prices staying high, guys? Any bulls out there? All right, so pending sales also down. Let me go down here a little bit more and we'll knock this out. So here it is right here, okay? I think this is one of the most important sets of data other than like unaffordability is you see what's going on in the market right now. You see price cuts surging. I mean, look at the trajectory, guys. That trajectory, it's like parabolic. I mean, it's out of control. The trajectory of price cut. If the houses were selling on the low end of median and prices were really going up, we would not see this to this degree. We may still see price cuts, but not to this degree. Okay, the price cuts is historic. So when you look at those price cuts being 6.5%, this is when we had price decline in 2022. Okay, when price cuts reach that, we are now exceeding that 2 months ahead of schedule about. Okay, so 2 months ahead. But in addition to the price cuts, Jack, and Melody knows this as well, the DOM's over 30 days. All right, and we're 4 months ahead of DOM. So again, price cuts, DOM, that's leading the market. I really don't care what anyone says. Those are the most important things. And you guys, that's why I think that we will have price nominal and real, but we will have nominal price decline this year. It will be worse than 2022, and those are the reasons why. What do you guys think?
I would caution on two subjects. And Travis, all the data that you just sent was very, very compelling. There are two headwinds to that argument. We still have a growing money supply, despite everything the Fed is telling us about quantitative tightening. The money supply is heading up, and they're talking about sending interest rates lower. Those are both two very inflationary headwinds that are going to put upward pressure on those prices, even as all of these things like days on markets and price drops and supply, overbuilding. Those inflationary pressures from monetary and fiscal policy are going to put upward pressure on prices. I don't know if it's going to be enough to offset all this other data, but it is something we're going to be struggling with.
So here's what's interesting. Here's M2. M2 has been going up since about October. You see that?
Yep.
But look at what's been happening recently. And this is interesting. Since about mid-April, what's been going on with M2 money supply?
I think tax day played a role there. I think that probably played a role somehow. That's a pretty big financial event that causes money to move around. I would wait for a little bit more data before I drew too many conclusions from that drop. You see, we had the same thing happened at the end of January to a lesser extent, but
I also like putting in Fred, like real. Anytime you guys put in real and then the data, you guys get to see what it is adjusted for inflation. So we looked at nominal, look at real. Let me do the 1 year. Okay, there's the 1 year on the real. What do you make of that, Jack?
I'd have to know more. I'm not familiar with this data point, M2 real, how they adjust it. But that certainly doesn't show a growing money supply.
Right. Adjusted for inflation. But yeah, I understand you need to look at the calculator.
How do you adjust money supply for inflation? Money supply growth is inflation.
I know. You tell me when you know. I don't know. I don't know the formulas. Melody, do you want to add anything?
I think you covered it, Jeff.
All right. Did you guys see any? I got some questions I say from the last segment. I'll throw these questions up and then we'll move on. I'm really sorry. Did I talk too long? I think I may have talked too long. All right. Here's one right here. Oh, no. Here's one from Tony. Okay. So this is from Tony. The median sales price of existing homes is being distorted by higher sales in the luxury segment as overall sales continue to struggle. Is this similar to the period prior to the last downturn? If you can, Melody, Can you try to answer that? I wasn't tracking that data back during the GSC, so I'm not sure.
So in terms of, so in many ways, yeah. I mean, so when looking at that 25-year history, guys, it gave me so much perspective. And of course, it's not something you can get for free. NAR took the information down from the FRED site and started charging people for it. But yes, I mean, in many ways, what I'm seeing, we are kind of, and I shared this chart in our last, I believe, live, but we're kind of tracking right between 2007, 2008. And I honestly think that we're going to follow the trajectory more like 2007 here at the end of the year, which fell off a lot greater off of that seasonal arc. So what I want everyone to kind of understand right now is we are not tracking off the average. So for the past 25 years, every housing market season has kind of had the same exact arc. And we are right on track of that and tracking right at those 2007, 2008 levels. So I honestly see very similar kind of setup here.
I muted myself. Jack, we're going to end this unless you have anything else to add.
No, I just reiterate again that money supply growth and that lower interest rates, historically, that is rocket fuel for home prices. And the easy money, the Zerpenber, is coming.
All right, guys. And that, my friends, is a wrap. All right. So we're going to move on to our story number 5. Ooh, this one's from Jack. Okay, Jack, you ready for your story? I'm looking forward to it.
So this is going to be a quick one, guys. This is an update to a story from last week, and it was the most important soundbite we got from the Federal Reserve in a long time, in my opinion.
Jack,
but just to catch everybody, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. Do you want me to play that soundbite? I completely forgot.
I'll tell you when to cue up the soundbite. Yep. The first thing, just to catch everybody up, we did this video. This is the thumbnail up there. The title of the video was "The Unemployment Lie Exposed," and I did a whole segment on this in our stream last week. I'll summarize it very briefly. The jobs report, that $272,000 jobs number that got reported, that was from the establishment survey of the non-farm payrolls. And in my opinion, that was bunk. Because if you looked at the household survey of the jobs number that we did in this video, it showed a loss of 625,000 full-time jobs, offset by a gain of just 286,000 part-time jobs. So we had a huge gap between the two surveys in the jobs number. One showed almost 400,000 jobs lost. And of course, the more celebrated and popularized number showed 272,000 gain. And this gap has been growing like crazy for the last year. I've been covering this a lot on my channel. Travis, we've talked about this a lot on some of the guest appearances on your channel, that the strong labor market is just a fake talking point. It's a lie. And we did this video about it. And then we got this question from Janelle Marte from Bloomberg at the last FOMC press conference. And pay close attention to what Jerome Powell said on Wednesday when asked about the strong labor market. Trav, you can go ahead and cue that up now.
Hi, Chair Powell, Janelle Marte from Bloomberg. As you noted, the labor market is now in many ways back to where it was before the pandemic. I wondered if you could comment on how officials are viewing that. So do you think that there still needs to be more cooling in the labor market to bring inflation all the way down to 2%? Or is there any sense that maybe the labor market is more vulnerable now to higher rates now that many of those imbalances have eased?
By so many measures, the labor market was kind of overheated 2 years ago, and we've seen it gradually move back into much better balance between supply and demand. We have seen unemployment creep up now 0.6 over the course of a year or so, very, very gradually. But more than that, you've got strong job creation. You have payroll jobs still coming in strong, even though there's an argument that they may be a bit overstated, but still, they're strong.
As a quick follow-up, the surveys that make up the jobs report are showing different tales. There's been some divergence, especially we saw in the last report that we got on Friday. So how do you interpret that, and how does it change your view on the labor market?
So sometimes you can't reconcile the differences. You just have to look at it and try to understand. And that's why it always makes sense to look at a series, in 3, 6, and 12 months of things rather than just one report. But you're right to point to the last report where there were job losses in the household survey, job gains, big job gains in the establishment survey. So, we're left with ambiguous results, and we have to deal with that uncertainty around data.
All right. So there was a lot to unpack in that statement there, but I think that was huge what Powell just said there in that question. First of all, nothing gets said by accident at these meetings. These are scripted questions. They are pre-approved, pre-filtered. All right. So Powell knew that was coming, and he practiced that answer. So I want to just talk about a couple of key points that they talked about. He said the labor market was overheated. It's arguments about how overheated it was, but I think that's a relatively true statement. Now he's saying that the labor market is coming back into better balance between supply and demand. In other words, more people are out of work, and so wages are going up slower. He won't say that because putting poor people out of a job is what the Fed is doing right now. And well, that talking point doesn't poll so well in focus groups, so they say supply and demand are coming more into balance. But really, it's all about preventing you from getting a raise. Again, something I've been talking about a lot. He referenced the rise in unemployment by 0.6%. Now, he talked about the strong jobs creation numbers, and then he acknowledges, he says that there is an argument that some of those job creation numbers may be slightly overstated. Now, that is a huge admission from Jerome Powell. First of all, he's saying there is an argument. He's like, oh, I'm not saying that. Just others are saying that. Just those doomers are saying that. Well, we're right. They are overstated, right? We had that story in Bloomberg that I talked about in that video last week that said they overstated by 730,000 last year. More than a quarter of the jobs created last year that they announced never happened. So there is an argument that they might be overstated. He's admitting that the non-farm payrolls numbers for the last year have been BS. That is huge to see the Federal Reserve chairman acknowledge that at an FOMC press conference. That is such a huge statement, in my opinion. And there hasn't been much coverage of this admission in the press. I think it's huge. And then there was a follow-up, Janelle Marte and her follow-up. And by the way, my hat's off to her for actually asking a probing question. I know these are scripted and pre-approved, but so many of these questions at the Fed are softballs. And Janelle Marte actually asked a hard-hitting question. So good on her for that. More of that from the press, please. She talked about the divergence in the survey, which is exactly what we talked about in our report last week. The big difference between the establishment saying 272,000 gained and the household saying 400,000 plus lost. And she's saying, how can you reconcile that? And Powell says, you can't. So he's obviously saying one of these numbers is bunk. And he referred to it as ambiguous data. Now, that's, again, soft wording, ambiguous data. I think he mispronounced BS when he said ambiguous. But for Jerome Powell to acknowledge this, for the press to, in a scripted question, send that to him, Powell is acknowledging that the labor numbers are being either there's an error in the collection or they're being manipulated politically. He didn't suggest the manipulation. But this was a huge admission by Powell that the strong labor market is not as strong as he has been saying over and over again. Now, that's also a very dovish comment because in Powell saying the labor market is not as strong as everybody's been saying, by extension, that means the Fed may be closer to cutting interest rates than they're telling us. So I think that was my biggest takeaway from the Fed's meeting on Wednesday. It kind of got lost in translation. It didn't get a lot of attention. Some people on Twitter pointed it out. But Jerome Powell admitting exactly what we said last week here on DNN, that those jobs numbers are not to be trusted. I mean, he's saying ambiguous. There's an argument. They may be slightly overstated. And he even made the outright lie. He said, there was some losses in the household survey, and then there was gains, big gains in the establishment survey. Well, the losses in the household survey were actually triple or double the gains in the establishment. So actually the big belongs with the losses in the household, not with the gains in the establishment. But so the summaries here, Jerome Powell acknowledging the strong labor market is not as strong as they're saying. That's a huge deal. I told you we'd be quick with that one.
Jack, do you think that's why we initially, people were kind of wondering why we saw that rally I think the market picked up on it. Or what do you think? You watch the market much closer than I do.
If you go back and you look at the S&P chart of last week, you know what the stock market did, almost the entirety of the move the stock market made last week was on Wednesday morning, right at the open after that CPI. And it actually closed pretty much right about that same level, give or take a couple of points. So everything that happened between CPI and Friday market close did not really move markets very much in one direction or another. So I would say the big market moving event this week was definitely that lower than expected inflation print. Powell didn't really make a difference with anything that he said. But in my opinion, that was a very dovish comment. And I think a lot of market participants glossed over that. I think that means the rate cuts may be happening sooner rather than later.
Jack, I have something for you. My question is actually motivated and inspired by national disgrace. Okay. This is what he said. He said, "We are a lost generation, great times." The reason I brought this up is I want the young adults to understand that when I was a young adult, I was also a lost generation from 2000 to 2005. Okay. So again, the unaffordability and the market and how out of reach home ownership was in 2005, 2006 is similar to what it is today when you look at equity appreciation and the lack of income growth. So I understand national disgrace. I understand what you're saying because I was in your same exact situation in the 2000s. Okay, I was a young adult. My question, Jack, is would you agree though the difference is that we don't have the second half of this decade played out? Whereas in the GFC, again, I was a lost generation. I had given up hope, but the housing market corrected in the form of crashing prices. Would you say, Jack, that, for the young adults, would you agree that it is a lost generation if things continue the way they are?
Yes, I do. I think the millennials and to a lesser extent the Zoomers are suffering the brunt of the just outright failure of monetary and fiscal policy in the United States. All right. Now, the test comes the next time they offer the stimmies. All right. I hope by now we have learned that when the government says we're going to give you money, they're robbing you. All right. I hope people have learned that lesson because in 2020, they all said, we're going to give you this and the American Rescue Plan, and here's $600 and here's an expanded child care credit. It was all printed money that they gave you. Gosh, thanks, government. And I'm going to go out and spend it. And then your cost of living went up way more than the money they gave you. So I hope the younger generations, and I see it all the time, I see the videos of people complaining in their cars about the cost of living. Guys, the time to worry about that was when they were offering you the free stuff in 2020. And I'm saying that because they're going to offer you the free stuff again. When this crash happens, it will eventually. I don't know when. I'd be a billionaire if I could tell when. But I do know when it happens, they're going to offer you the free stuff again. It is a drug. Don't take it because that means the next wave of inflation that's going to make you even poorer is coming behind that. Don't let the stimmies flow, guys. They're not giving you anything. They're robbing you when they do that. Don't fall for that crap again. And again, younger people and the way they vote. If you're going to vote for the people who are promising you free money, then do not complain in your car when your cost of living goes up, which, by the way, your car, also your house, probably because you can't afford one. The easy money and the low interest rates is why you can't afford a house.
We got about 2.5 minutes. I got a couple good questions. I wanted to show you real quick, Jack, K-Pal. And if you can confirm this. Oh, I'm sorry. Here we are, K-Pal right here. We actually have 4 comments from K-Pal. He's on a roll today. Thank you, K-Pal, for being an absolute stud. And you're also your profile picture. I love it. Okay. Yep. The household survey only counts multiple job holders one time, whereas the establishment survey does not make that distinction. Is that correct, Jack?
That is correct. The establishment survey calls up establishments, businesses, says, how many people did you hire? Right. And then the household survey calls up and says, how many people in your house are working? And now the household survey does keep track of multiple job holders. And I had that number here. The multiple job holders increased by 16,000 last month. So we did have a lot more people got second or third jobs. And multiple job holders is up by over 1 million in the last year. So that does partially explain the discrepancy there, K-Pal, but it doesn't fully explain it. but multiple job holders, people being forced by inflation to get a second job to make ends meet, absolutely playing a role there.
So to reiterate what you just said, you're saying the establishment survey double counts people. Is that
If
correct?
somebody is working 2 jobs, the establishment survey is counting the same person twice. Yes.
That's wrong, right? I mean, I'm saying that's a bad way. Not you're wrong for that. All right, I'll shut up. One more real quick, Jack. He's also saying establishment survey also doesn't account for unincorporated and self-employment individuals. Is that right?
I don't know how gig work affects the establishment survey. I don't know if they call up Uber and say, how many drivers do you have? But the household survey specifically accounts for self-employed, unincorporated, i.e. gig workers. And once again, where is that one? That one was up by 113,000 last month. And that's another one that's been rising pretty steadily, close to 1 million over the last year. So it's another one of those trends of people are losing well-paying full-time jobs and they're getting BS gig work and part-time jobs to try to offset it. And, you know, there's a lot of misery that doesn't get captured in these economic data points associated with something like that, that I think is one of the reasons why we get the bad vibes that the people in the financial press always talk about. Oh, the S&P 500 is at an all-time high. How come you poor idiots don't understand how good you have it? Well, gee, it's because I can't watch CNBC because I'm too busy working 3 freaking jobs to afford what I used to be able to afford with my 1 full-time job.
Quick question. All right. Last question, Jack, because I have a last question already, Jeff. I think this is a great question, but I already have a last question. Can you say something positive? So negative, Jack. You're always just negative Nancy over here. Could you say something positive for a change about the economy? Would you say it is good right now?
No, I wouldn't say it's good. I'll say the one positive thing about the economy, if you're willing to work that second job to make ends meet, it's out there. Yep. You can find it. All right. Talk to small business owners. They're still struggling to find good help. All right. So people who are willing to work their butts off to get a meager extra little bit of wages, you at least have that option for now. 6 months from now, 8 months from now, we may not even have that option. So that's a good thing, right? If you're willing to work that hard, you do have the opportunity to do it. Unfortunately, we're being forced by inflation to do so. And I don't think that's fair to people. But, you know, the fact is these part-time jobs are available. So you can get them if you need them.
I appreciate you holding back and being mild-mannered. Melody, anything you want to add before we end that segment?
No, I think it's going to go nicely into our next segment on consumer sentiment. So,
all right, then that is a wrap. And let's get Melody in the hot seat. I'm going to put you. Okay, be ready. Boom, you're in the hot seat, Melody. You're on your own now, girl. I wish you the best. And
sure, you can.
Gotcha.
I hope you win. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. I'm going to do something a little different in this segment, asking you guys for some feedback. But, you know, I want to talk about consumer sentiment, but I also want to lay the groundwork because we use a lot of terms that I think for those folks that are, working 3 jobs and they don't have time. But so kind of wanted to start with the basics, the building blocks here, and just talk about quickly what is gross domestic product. This is what we talk about, GDP, all the time. And Travis and I often talk about, you know, how much consumption is a part of gross domestic product. But essentially, this is the total monetary or market value of all the finished goods and services produced within a country's borders in a specific time period. And it is there to kind of give you the health of that economy. And as we know, we have been seeing revisions to GDP and it has been slowing. It's not in contraction or it's not negative at the moment, which is why we're not in a recession. But I just want you guys to keep this definition in mind. And the next slide here is where I'm going to ask for some feedback from you two. This is GDP by industry in the US. And this is just a nice little visual chart. This was put together at the end of 2023. But what stands out to you the most about this chart? And I'll give you a hint to look at the corners and the largest chunks. But who wants to go first? Travis or Jack?
I'll go. I'm having trouble reading it. But I see that, real estate's 3.3 trillion, but I was looking on the bottom right where it said
Mhm.
state and local and federal and government. And I was like, okay, well, what happens when we remove that and we just look at like private sector jobs and stuff? Because what's the total? That's $3 trillion of GDP is from that portion of government spending.
Right.
And that's what I'd say I'd noticed the most.
Jack?
Yeah, sorry, my blind butt. I just can't read it. All I can see is the numbers, Mel. I'm sorry. Unless we can
Oh,
blow
no,
that
you're
thing up, I
fine.
can't comment on it.
I think so. Sorry about that. But what I'd say is up here you have professional and business services, which is about 3.5 trillion. In my mind, that's kind of hyper financialization up there, Jack.
Yeah.
And then you have real estate here at 3.3 trillion. And then, what I found you might find interesting in this is that information was only 1.5 trillion down here. I found that very interesting.
I wonder if that
And
includes big data. Is that
I
included
wonder,
information?
right?
Big data
Right.
is big money. That seems small.
That seems very small to me. So this might be something we dig into, because basically it's saying information and retail is about the same. But what's interesting here too, construction at 1.1 trillion, up here 2.9 trillion for manufacturing. Something a lot of people have been saying as well, it doesn't matter if manufacturing's in construction, it's not a big part of the economy anymore. I think you guys can see that it is still kind of a significant part of our economy. But my biggest point I think is exactly what Travis picked up on is this government sector is a huge portion. But then secondly, I want to this real estate is a very large chunk. And then you add on construction to real estate. I'd say most people will argue that housing, residential real estate is about 12 to 18% of GDP. So, but just looking at how big, how government's become such a big bookend here, I think is important. Okay, sorry guys to do that to you and not send you the image beforehand. It is a little blurry. But I wanted to talk about the results we got this week with consumer sentiment. Now, you're not going to see it on this graph because for whatever reason, May has not even been updated here, but we just got preliminary June numbers, and it's dropped to the lowest level in 7 months in early June. You might probably can't see them down here, but that's 65.6 was a consumer sentiment number. But what I want to talk about here more than anything is what do you notice about this graph in particular? The highest point was reached in February of 2000. And so, again, what is consumer sentiment actually? And I should have started with this definition instead of GDP. But consumer sentiment is how consumers are feeling about the economy. And because consumption is almost 70% of GDP, meaning if we're not out there spending, GDP is contracting. And so it's very important how we feel about the economy, how we feel about our future earnings, because if we're not spending out there, then the economy is going to be worsening. And so, Travis, you look like you wanted to ask a question. I can pause there real quick.
You're good at what you do. You're good. I will say that. So it appears it's a little bit hard for me to see the graph, but there's a couple things I wanted to point out. It appears that consumer sentiment peaks right before recession. Is that what we're seeing here? Which to me demonstrates that consumers have no idea or care about what's really happening. Because if it's peaking and then boom, recession, that means they were blindsided. In fact, it also demonstrates that we can't even go into recession until consumer sentiment, or is it sentiment?
Cinnamon.
Oh yeah, that's
Cinnamon.
right.
Definitely cinnamon. Definitely.
Until it goes down. And then I also noted that it appears that actually consumer sentiment is lower than what it was prior to any other recession, maybe any other recession, maybe minus 1980s.
Yeah. And I think too, what I want to show is this is really since February of 2000, we've been going down in terms of the sentiment number. And so it hasn't been a straight line down. Of course, nothing is, but where we are is pretty abysmal. And to your point, we're seeing numbers like this. 2011, that was somewhat of a global recession, even if we weren't feeling it here. But yeah, and that since February of 2000, this has just been on a downward trajectory. We have not broken that high again. And so I think that's important too, because I think when I talk a lot about the silent depression and how after really 2007, all the trend lines have been broken of how the economy was moving forward. And so, what we see in the press often is when these numbers even go up like one little tick, it's similar to what you were saying, Travis, about the all-time highs. Well, okay, so we get, and I'll talk about this in a minute with the small business sentiment survey, that everybody wants to make a big deal about these points, these tiny little points in the media. That's because they're trying to keep you from realizing it's been coming down since February of 2000 and from a trend perspective. So before I move on though, Jack, did you want to say anything?
I would just point out that, and forgive me if I'm jumping ahead here, it looks like the chart is still lingering around 70. We just saw a pretty substantial drop this week from 69 down to
60,
65. Am I
correct.
jumping ahead, Mel?
No. And that's, so it's the numbers on the chart are April. They haven't updated for May, which was even further down from this 77. But we just got June, which went down to 65, like you were talking about. Mm-hmm.
So there's a pretty significant leg down that has not yet populated on this chart that I think reflects we're still trending in a downward direction. That little bounce at the end there kind of gives it an impression that we're moving in the right direction. I think the most recent data points counter that pretty effectively.
Yeah. And they're too small to see here. I don't know why this chart hasn't been updated yet. It should have been updated for May numbers. But there you go.
Fred is slow to update sometimes. Yeah,
yes.
I've seen it.
Okay, then, so just kind of the next thing that I want to talk about is, and I mentioned it already, that consumption, our expenditure is 70% of gross domestic product. Okay. And so if we stop spending, that's big trouble for, our economy. And so that is why so much of our media is out there about getting us to continue to spend, even if we go into debt, which, they don't care about us personally, guys. They care about where our money is going. And so they don't care about our financial choices. They just, as Jack was saying when he was talking about Powell, who can sit up there and say the labor market is coming into balance. What he's saying is people are losing jobs. And it's like, if you remember that scene in The Big Short, when Brad Pitt's character is like, for every 1% increase of unemployment, like, what did he say? 30,000 people die.
50,000 people die.
Yeah.
Deaths of despair. Yeah.
Deaths of despair, which we, again, going back to that silent depression, that's a term Emil Kalinowski came up from Eurodollar University. You look, all the deaths of despair have been going up like it materially since the GFC. And so there's a lot of trends out there. A lot of the doom that we're talking about, this stuff has been developing for a long time. And I think that those in the power do not want us to understand the true nature, because if we do, we'll stop spending our dollars enslaving ourselves with debt, which then means the coffers of those in power would start to hurt a little bit. That's think about, we've seen the Fed, we've seen Nancy Pelosi, we've seen all these people enriching themselves on the stock market. The Fed, some of them got into, it looks like a little trouble, but not really. And so if that stops happening, guys, when the party stops, it's that 1% that holds stock that are going to be impacted the most. And the way the music really stops, they want to convince you it's the Fed taking away the punch bowl. But in reality, the only way the music really stops is when you stop making poor decisions about your future and putting yourself in debt. And you have to remember that next to you, the one trying to do the right thing for your family, are the speculators and fraudsters that are using that for ill-gotten gains and going out and gambling with that money. And so the government, Powell, when he talks about you're a number. He doesn't. They're bringing the labor market into balance. He's not saying you are going to lose your job and you're going to lose your ability to take care of your family. But that is what he's actually saying. Okay, so moving
can I
on,
ask you
just
real quick
go
on
ahead.
that?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you something, Melody. Can you go back to that chart real quick? It was hitting me when you were talking. So basically we have kind of a record share of gross domestic product from personal consumption expenditures. But in addition to that, we also have, and correct me if I'm wrong, record high government spending, deficit spending. Is that correct, Melody?
Correct. And a
That's
lot of people argue, like Lacey Hunt, that debt is non-productive money, and there is only so much return you can get on a dollar of debt. And so, to your point, Travis, with the government spending the way that it's spending, with us spending the way that we're spending, shouldn't our GDP be much higher? That's that's a 8-year conversation, but but things are not great, guys. And if and honestly, what I would love to see in this country is that we move back to a more productive economy where we're actually making things, we're building, we're creating, we're investing in our ideas and businesses. But so much of what's happened in the last decade is that people have stopped investing in their core business and have just done buybacks to get those share returns. And so, the money's not going to the employees. It's not going back to the business. It's not going to research and development. It's just going back to the CEOs, the executives, and the shareholders. And it's not helping our economy. Okay, so I want to talk about small business sentiment in particular, because I think one of the great things about our country that we often forget, because right now, as Jack talks about every day on his show, we have these companies, the Magnificent Seven, are that essentially are taking all the headlines, all the space out there. But in reality, it's our small businesses that are the lifeblood of America. And they employ over 40% of employment. And I know that may seem odd, but most, a good chunk of our Americans work for small businesses as opposed to the big conglomerates. So we just got a headline that says, small business survey, highest level of the year. And this is going to go back to all the things we were just talking about. The reality, the reading was better than the forecast of 89.8, but marked the 29th straight month that the index has been below the series average of 97.9. And this is, guys, highest all year. Okay, then. I mean,
Can I just, Mel, can I
Yeah.
just interject real quick? I mean,
Yeah.
what a contrast when you look at the chart versus the headline you just showed me. I mean, look, it's highest level of the year. Oh my God, everything is so great. And now look at that chart. We're down here at not quite peak COVID levels. I mean, the chart is terrible. The eternal search for optimism in the mainstream press is on full display here. And you just beautifully illustrated that. I'm sorry. I had to blurt that out. I couldn't control myself.
No, I think this is exactly it, guys. All-time highs, which we know are only all-time because the data got revised. That happened. I mean, and then survey of construction, highest level all year. Okay, great. Again, because a lot of times these things are seasonal. They peak seasonally, like in the housing market specifically. Home prices will peak seasonally. But I also think, guys, you go back in history, the stock market has its seasons too. And we're in the run up of spring to the summer solstice, and I believe this is when you get peak mania, honestly, out there in general. But so, okay, it ticked up a tiny little point. It's still well below the series average, and that's what's important, because every month guys, you think about all the different people. Like we know with like the establishment survey, they're surveying 600 people on a quarterly basis. They get information from 9 million establishments. But, when they get surveyed, something could have changed. That's not going to be, it could be a one-time effect that next month, that's not going to be the same trend. And so these month over month, I think they're trying to make us insane, guys. Because I actually remember when I was reading on my phone, my feeling when I heard that headline, because I believed it at first. I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, what in the heck happened with everything that I know? And then, of course, it took me a few seconds because I've been looking at this data for a long time to find the truth. But if you don't look at it, it's going to take you much longer. So to me, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. That headline just reminds me of like, if the wife is out and I'm home alone with the kids or something and she calls, I say, good news, honey. Half the house is totally untouched by fire.
Exactly.
That's what they're doing here in the press, the highest in a year. It really is. You've got to laugh at it. If you can't laugh at it, then you're left with the reality of how they're just gaslighting the hell out of people. And that's depressing. So yeah, I'll choose laughing about it.
Right.
Melody, I have one thing too. You know how me and you kind of talk about like, are they going to call the recession in October?
Mhm.
Right? Like, are they going to go back because of the data? This is looking at this data right here. I'm going to say it's one of the strongest data points that has pushed me to like, okay, they're going to call October the recession. Because if you look there, that's actually a historically low sentiment. By far, prior to recession, it's so low. Those are recessionary numbers. So this data right here, 1 point for you and Danielle on this data.
Yeah. So what's fascinating too, though, guys, we look at all these different surveys. I think about the builder survey all the time. And I mean, they are the biggest cheerleaders. Like there's nothing. And I remember that from the GFC, they were the last business unit to admit defeat. But here, the small business chief economist, he seems to be the only chief economist I've seen who has gotten the memo. But he basically says, listen, small business sector is responsible for the production of over 40% of GDP and employment, a crucial portion of the economy. But for 29 consecutive months, small business owners have expressed historically low optimism, and their views about future business conditions are at the worst level seen in 50 years. Small business owners need relief as inflation has not eased much on Main Street. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't seen something out of an economist like that in many of these theories.
Oh, honesty? You mean honesty?
Yeah.
Quick, somebody say something about artificial intelligence before they read this.
Anyone? No.
This is the bifurcated economy, right? This is in full display. America's small business, America's mom and pops. They have never been more down on their prospects. And yet these Mag 7 companies now make up a record high portion of the S&P 500, all of them at all-time highs. These things are related. This is not a coincidence that it's like this. This is the result of that inflationary monetary policy of the Zerpenberg, the easy money and low interest rates. It has created these conditions.
Yeah. And one thing that I was thinking about too, Jack, is, often as I was preparing for this story, thinking a lot about PPP fraud, it was not a lot, but, some small businesses, theoretically, the ERC tax credit fraud we've seen. But honestly, the lion's share, I think sometimes, and absolutely those two things were definitely market forces, and we need to talk about the fraud and we need to talk about that ERC tax credit. But so many of our American small businesses are truly struggling out there, and you can hear stories about them not getting the ERC retention credit in time and closing doors and things like that. And so I just want like a check. I have to do a gut check for myself as well, that when I'm looking at all the fraud out there, I can't also forget how much small businesses are suffering as well.
And you also know, real quick, Mel, the 29 months, that takes us back, based on when this data came out. This is data from May. So that takes us back pretty much to January of 2022, which is when the stock market started to crash. with all the big tech layoffs in early 2022, and it crashed all the way through November of 2022 when the AI mania started. And the AI mania has seen concentrations of wealth in the Mag 7 companies, but all the while small businesses continue to fall while this investment bubble has been created on Wall Street. It has not at all changed things on Main Street. So just the fishy accounting over there, man.
I think so if I can extrapolate as well, like the bezel, right? The inflated prices, the round tripping, the I'm going to buy chips and not an arm's length agreement, the propping up of these stocks, the fact that these stocks are being used as, casino chips. So I think absolutely, Jack, and what I would say from what you just said is that we are in peak mania. It could get worse. Don't get me wrong. Like it could go up higher from here. But what Main Street is feeling right now is depressed. And I think that one of the reasons people are latching on to this mania is because they're in denial. And we as humans, it's one of our superpowers is denial. And we're going to latch on to anything that we can to avoid the reality. And this is the reality of Main Street. And just quickly, I kind of wanted to talk about this next. This is total business sales. Okay, so sales from these small businesses. And just, want to talk about how these trend lines have really been broken. And so if you just stayed on this trend line, you can see that we've never recovered from here. And so, and this also has to do with the fact that we've shut down so many of these small businesses, the fact that, they couldn't survive. And you can see here that COVID, we started going back up. Likely, I didn't look at the real versus nominal here, Travis, but we've just been chopping around. And so we are not trending up. And so again, this is just another sign we've broken the trend lines. And right now things aren't getting better.
It looks like QE versus QT right there.
Total business sales stopped going up the second they stopped printing money in 2022, right?
Yep.
Wasn't it? When was the first rate or the first QT? I believe March of 22.
March. Yep.
Yeah. And when does this chart level off?
Looks
right
like
around that time. Isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right about there.
Interesting.
Yep. And then this was just the real GDP per capita. And again, it's hard to see on this scale, but in reality, we're off trend again here as well. And so that, this is what I really wanted all of us to see is that it can, with all these headlines, just like as I made Jack very angry, showing him that dichotomy between the headline and what the reality, but I would say it's all about, perspective, and you have to zoom out. And the minute you really start to zoom out, you can see a much more complicated story than what they're telling you in the press. And it's not all rosy out here. So I'll end there, guys, if you have questions from the group.
Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, Melody, you perfectly captured the whole reason we started this channel, that we're just not getting straight answers from the mainstream press. They're telling us everything is so great. What's the matter with us? Why don't we understand how good things are? Look at the small businesses. Look at the consumer health. All of that data you just showed me shows what the average person is feeling. And then you've got the mainstream press saying highest in a year. And, I'm sorry I blurted it out, and I'm not mad at you. I know I kind of struck a nerve there. But you just perfectly illustrated that. Very well done. Thank you so much for doing that. And I think a lot of people can look at that and say, it's not just me.
Right.
Here's the data that says it. Yeah, my lived experience is shared by millions of people, and these muckety mucks on TV are full of it, and they're getting rich off of that misery. I think more people need to see that information. So excellent job.
Well, thank you, but I was so grateful for your reaction, because that is exactly what I wanted.
Were the veins? Did I have veins sticking out of my forehead?
Well, I think that we all get
Maybe I can count.
passionate about this, right? Because it's just, they're preying on our emotion. And if you didn't have, this perspective, it would just feel, I would feel crazy. I mean, I still feel crazy, but go ahead,
I mean,
Trav.
since we're talking about consumer cinnamon again,
Cinnamon?
Cinnamon, like
Okay.
Cinnamon Toast Crunch. It's not that good of a
Mhm.
cereal. But
No.
if people were doing well at home on Main Street, if people were actually making money, wouldn't sentiment be going up right now? I mean, probably be going up.
Yeah, I think cinnamon would definitely be going up if people were making more money. They buy more cinnamon. So,
They would.
but yes, I think that, as you rightly pointed out, cinnamon is just cinnamon, though. At the end of the day, it's not based on hard data or facts.
Yeah.
And it does look like there's quite a few examples that we hit peak cinnamon when it is right before we crash. And what does that say about humanity? I think it's that maybe what I was saying, we get the most delusional right before everything really, we are denying the reality in front of us.
All right. So we're going to move on to the questions just for time, unless Jack, do you want to add anything for Melody?
No, feel free to move on.
I got one from Jeff M. Hopefully he'll be the next interviewer of DNN. Jeff's a good dude. This is what he has to say. He's saying, I wish you would agree with me. Never. I agree with you, Melody. You are super smart. Jeff, what? Bro, I never get those type of, and this is my boy. Anyways, but the entire system is predicted.
Predicated.
I'm sorry. Why am I struggling? Predicated and relies on more and more debt creation and bad habits. If we don't have all of the morons, the whole system collapses. Bad spending habits. Do you agree with that?
So I, in theory, agree that the entire system is predicated on these things. However, I believe we can change the system. I believe we actually have the power to change the system. 70%, guys, 70% of GDP. You may think our votes don't count, but our money does. So, vote with your money. And so I'm just not the kind of person, I can't, we're always living in some sort of system, but if we don't like it, we have to figure out ways to, change things. And that's what I focus on.
Can we take it a step further? And can you explain, Melody, when you say vote with your money, tell the viewers what you mean.
So one way is, I think Jeff was the one that asked about the economy, and I was going to take that. So economy, well, I can tell you what the positives, this economy in my life, which is I just planted a garden. And I'm super excited about that because that is one of the ways that I'm going to combat inflation. But it's also a way that I'm taking care of my health, taking care of my family's health while I'm saving money. And I'm also choosing to live a different way. Like I completely changed the way that I live. So that's a positive to me. And so that's me changing the way that I operate within the system to hopefully change the system.
We just need more of us, huh, Melody?
I think we're everywhere. It's just everyone needs the opportunity to the time to see for themselves. And I think, unfortunately, people are working too hard out there often.
And I have another comment right here for you, and it is the elite are pushing small businesses out. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think so. These are corporate interests. These monopolies over time have just consolidated power, and so, the folks that own these monopolies are the elites. So I think so.
Can I just chime in on that? Without big government, that would not be possible. I'm thoroughly convinced big business is unable to compete with small business in almost every industry, because there's just too much waste. Once your company gets above a certain standpoint, you start to get stupid things like departments saying, we better hurry up and spend this money before Christmas, otherwise we're going to get a smaller budget next year. So our company is intentionally being less efficient because of these siloed interests that happen within big companies. You don't get that crap in small businesses. So without regulatory capture, without these elites using the government to throw up roadblocks, like, say arresting a gym owner who tries to open during a certain scare that's going on, or, I don't think big business could compete against small business on a level playing field. And I think, guys, we need to demand that change. We need to stop allowing big business to exert so much influence. And again, when they offer you the stimmies, when they offer you the easy money, no, thank you. It's a narcotic what they're offering you, right? It's that kid from the Dare commercials in the 1980s offering you something you shouldn't take. All right, it's say no, and it's coming again. They're gonna do it again.
And Travis, to your point, just to bring it back to your question that I didn't actually answer, what is voting with your dollars? So yes, I'm using my dollars to buy seeds and plant. I'm also making a very concerted effort to buy locally as well. That's, find your CSA, which that's usually a group of farmers doing vegetables and things like that. But if you can spend your dollars with local businesses, of course, make sure they're ethical practitioners, et cetera. But that I think makes a difference because, you can see here certain local restaurants where I live made a real decision not to raise prices where the chains did. And so I whenever I go somewhere, I go there, and I let them know that I appreciate what they're doing. And so that's what I mean by voting with your dollars. And to Jack's point, if they give you the money, be real smart about the way you're going to use it. Because again, that's voting with your dollars.
Good stuff, Melody. Anything else you two want to talk about on the segment?
No, sir.
No, it's like, no, I'm tired. All right, you guys, that is a wrap. So, if you guys want to do the roundtable, I have some pretty good questions to cover.
Jack, do you have one more? Or?
No, I'm good. Let's do
private chat. Read the private chat. Let me throw up that that comment that was from earlier, where this was Nikki's response to it. I deleted the comment, unfortunately. But we had a viewer, you guys, and if we can end again on a more positive note, what can people do with this? How is us talking about this doom stuff helping people? Someone made a comment that hearing us is stressing them out. So if we could start with Jack, can you explain to people how maybe this stress is okay, or maybe they shouldn't be stressed? Can you respond to the fact that
I tend to imagine the worst in every scenario. It's part of my nuclear training. I used to work in commercial nuclear power, and we are just drilled over and over again. Imagine everything that could possibly going wrong, and then protect against that scenario. That's for safety reasons, defense in depth, overlapping protections, that kind of thing. And so I'm naturally drawn to the worst possible outcomes. That's just how I was trained. But there is an inherent optimism in that because you can't chart a clear path unless you know what the obstacles are, right? So if you can be good at identifying those obstacles before you come up on them, then you're not going to crash into them. So there is, beneath the doom, there is some optimism in there because, hey, we're pointing out commercial real estate, small business optimism, consumer is down. These are all things that people need to be aware of so they're not caught off guard by them. You're not going to get this information from the mainstream press. If you only listen to them, then you're going to be the last one to pile into whatever fad investment right before the rug pull happens, and then you'll end up being exit liquidity for the people who are robbing everyone. And so, yes, I understand how this can drag you down, but, you got to diagnose the problem first. Avoiding the diagnosis means you can never get any kind of treatment or not know what the remedy is. So try to remind yourself of that. And, I do this. I try not to get too down on myself. And sometimes I just need to get up and take a walk out around in my garden just to get away from it. But yeah, just, focus on this is the elimination of obstacles. This is pointing out the bad so we can fix it. Try to remember that optimistic take on it.
Melody?
Yeah. So similarly, Jack, I was trained that way. And to me, it's because it is the way. Growing up, I had a very tumultuous childhood and, had a lot of crazy situations that I had to navigate. And I got very good at figuring out exactly what all could go wrong and preparing for it, or preparing myself as much as I could. As I've gotten older, I've learned it's important that you see equally the good and the bad. But I am naturally one of those people that can let all the possible outcomes exist in my head at the same time. And what I've noticed about a lot of folks is it has to be an either or situation. And just the fact of even introducing a topic, sometimes people get very stressed. They can't even hold that idea in their head. And what I've found for myself personally is one of timing. I'm often saying it at exactly the wrong time when somebody's stressed out or things like that. And so what I would say is, when you come to Doomers News Network, make sure you're in the right headspace too, though. Like, don't just doom porn 24/7. Like Jack said, we all have to have those balances in our life and find the thing that gives you joy and makes you happy. We're not saying it's the end of the world. What we're actually trying to do is prepare you so that when you encounter these challenges, you have a set of tools. You are going to be able to respond, and you're going to be able to make productive choices for you and your family. And so, we will try to tell you the positive as well. I think we have here, but honestly, being aware in what's to come, in my opinion, is going to be a huge positive for everybody.
And I'll be quick here, you guys. So obviously, you guys hit the nail on the head there. So you didn't leave me much room except for these 2 key points. But in essence, awareness, right? Awareness leads to better preparation. Okay. As long as you don't freeze. So if you're freezing, listening to us, stop. This channel is not for you. The channel is made for people that are not going to freeze. They're going to be aware of what's going on, the possibility and the probability, and they're going to adjust. They're going to have better preparation. And another thing, don't be part of the problem. The awareness allows you to understand a little bit better, a little bit clearer what the problem is. And so if you're not part of the problem, reckless spending, it should empower you. Again, it starts with the awareness, but let it empower you guys. If you're not part of the problem, I give you a round of applause. You have my respect. Thank you. You should be proud of yourself. And then also, if even none of that works, and this is stressing you out, hopefully what it's doing is pushing you closer to the things that matter in your life, like your family and like your relationships. And honestly, you guys, I hate it. I'm not, maybe I'm like Jack and Melody, I don't know, but I do not like talking about the doom. I do not, it goes against my nature. I want to be talking about solution and how to help people, but I'm constantly being bombarded with revisions and greed and corruption and fraud and belittling and all these other things. And I mean, I don't like talking about it, but the thing is I'm in real estate. I'm a professional in real estate. I have nothing good to say. There's so many areas of doom and bad news that I have nothing to talk. What else can I talk about? I have nothing else to talk about. I want to talk about unicorns and sunshine. Just show me where they're at. I can't find them. But that's what I would say. That's what I would say there.
I think, just on a last note, the 3 of us, we're all actually very positive people when you're around us. We're smiling, happy, joking people. And so, we don't spend all of our time just talking about horrible things, but we're here doing it honestly because we feel it's a call to service in many ways that we feel. At least I can speak for me personally, that, this is my purpose, is that I have to, this information is something that I have been made aware of, and I have to bring it to light. I have to bring the message to others. I'm
still not working 3 months for free. That's a little side humor.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Thanks for nothing support.
Yeah, I enjoy you. Last question, man. I know we're running long. This is really good, and I'm actually intrigued to hear what you guys say. If the government is already printing money, they are, and handing it out like candy on Halloween, how much more can they print and give when things hit the fan? So he's basically saying they've already exhausted quantitative easing. They haven't even stopped it. So will it really help in the event of a crash, guys? Starting with Melody.
I'd say to start with Jack.
Okay, go, Jack.
Say that never ask a question that you know you're not going to like the answer to. How much can they print? The answer is always and forever much, much more. They've already printed amounts of money that we once thought unthinkable just a few years ago. Um, this is very much a, hold my beer kind of scenario among central bankers. And go look at some of those images from Weimar, Germany of the wheelbarrow economy. The phrase wheelbarrow economy was because you needed a wheelbarrow full of marks to be able to pay for a cup of coffee. Little kids stacking up big wads of bills like blocks. Waiters at restaurants using $100 bills to take orders because paper is more expensive than, a notepad would be more expensive. How much more can they print? The answer is always more. Be careful with that question. Trust me, guys, they can do much more damage. And unfortunately, we don't teach finance well in this country. Our education system puts out financially illiterate people. I know I was one of them. I did years and years of calculus, but I didn't know jack about finance when I got out of engineering school. It can always get worse. And man, those cautionary tales from Austria and Germany in the 1920s, guys, read up about that or suffer the consequences of repeating that history.
Melody, you are 100% right. I am glad I asked him. I mean, I'm glad you pushed it. But I'm going to flip this on Melody real quick. And I have another one for Melody. This is from Tony. I like Tony. 16 million vacant houses. Okay. That's according to the Census Bureau. Again, guys, we have 16 million vacant houses in the U.S. This is him, Tony. Immigration is the only thing keeping population growth positive. You study demographics, Melody. I thought this would be good for you. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, immigration has slightly changed our demographic picture a little. Depending on policy, we don't know how that's going to work. But kind of what I've been saying is the immigrants are already here. They're already housed. We have all this vacancy still. Yes, maybe some are living in hotels in New York and other places like that, but likely those hotels will be converted to apartments, or commercial real estate will be converted to apartments with that, $40 billion plan. So my point is like, in terms of housing prices, I don't believe that immigration is going to make a difference just because of all of the oversupply, at least not right now. Now, if we increase immigration exponentially, then of course that changes.
Jack, you want to add to it?
My wife and I found out a few months ago that my wife had never seen The Wire. And so we went back and we watched the whole series, The Wire, which was so excellent.
Okay.
And you absolutely can have an environment where you have mass homelessness and vacant houses occupying the same space. It seems so counterintuitive, but it's there in full display on The Wire, and all the misery and rot that comes along with it. Unless you create an environment where small business can thrive and create jobs and give people opportunities, you can have situations that seem so simple to solve. Vacant house, people with nowhere to live, problem solved. No, without opportunity, without an economy, if you don't take care of these crooks at the top who are just getting rich off of that misery, then that problem will persist. And to do that, you have to point out the excess. You have to point out the rot. You have to expose the fraud. That's how you fix it, by shining a light on it.
It's such a good show because I think Jack, for me, it was the first time you really saw on display our institutions failing. And they kind of, each season was a different institution, right? It was the police force. It was their teachers. I mean, you also got the drug economy, like you got how that was operating. But it was just such a good study of the failure of American institutions.
And at every stage in every one of those institutions, you had those bureaucrats who were short-sighted, manipulating data points to make themselves look good, chasing that promotion, not caring about all the damage that was being caused beneath them. And man, I mean, look around, look at the data points you just covered in your last segment, Melody. We can see it still to this day.
And that series, I can't remember the year exactly, but I remember where I was in Taiwan. It was 2005 when they were talking about it on the international Christine Amanpour is how I learned about that series. And they were talking about how it's the new Shakespeare. And I had never seen it or heard about it when I lived in the States, but everybody else was talking about it. But I honestly think if you think about that time period, I mean, that's exactly when we really, and you were talking about, Travis, that was the lost generation, that 2000 to 2005, when we were, seeing that first speculative bubble really explode in housing, for instance. But
all right, we're gonna wrap this. You guys, 3 hours and 8, and I promised 20 minutes a segment. We're still at 3 hours and 8 minutes. We're gonna get out of here. I just wanted to give big shout out to the viewers. Thank you for joining us. We really hope we're empowering you. Big shout out to Jack, to Melody as well. We're currently working for free. I'm not sure how much longer we're going to, but just you guys are just such a pleasure to be here with you on Saturday, talking about what's going on. I consider you guys great friends, great colleagues as well. Do you guys have any goodbyes you want to say, Jack?
One last thank you to Johnny Fly for being here today, for doing that interview. It was a pleasure to meet you. And thank you, everybody, for watching.
Melody?
yes, thank you so much, Johnny. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you again next week. And remember, don't forget, math matters.